When my son told me I was no longer welcome to see my grandchildren, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply nodded, walked to my car, and made one phone call. For months later, he was standing at my front door at 11 p.m., rain soaking through his expensive jacket, tears mixing with the water on his face. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking like it did when he was 7 and broke my favorite fishing rod. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. My name is Robert Chen, and for 34 years I built swimming pools. Not the inflatable kind you buy at Walmart for your kids to splash in during summer. I'm talking about the real thing: custom designs, heated systems, infinity edges that cost more than most people's houses. Chen's Aquatic Designs. You might have seen our work in Architectural Digest back in 2019. The Morrison estate with the vanishing edge that seemed to pour directly into San Francisco Bay. That was mine. I sold the business in 2021 for $4.2 million. Not enough to be wealthy by Bay Area standards, but enough to be comfortable. Enough to help my son when he needed it. Enough, apparently, to make me a target. But before the money, before the betrayal, there was family. Real family. The kind that didn't come with conditions or calculations. My wife, Linda, passed away in 2018. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. One day, we were planning a trip to visit her sister in Vancouver. The next, I was picking out casket linings and wondering how I was supposed to eat breakfast alone for the rest of my life. We had one son, David. Born in 1989, the same year the Giants won the pennant and I landed my first major contract. Linda used to joke that David came with good luck attached. For 32 years, I believed her. David was a good kid. Not perfect. He got suspended once in 8th grade for fighting, crashed my truck when he was 17, and spent his 20s bouncing between jobs like a pinball. But he had Linda's eyes and her laugh, and every time I looked at him, I saw the best parts of both of us combined. He met Victoria in 2016 at a marketing conference in Seattle. She was working for some tech startup, all buzzwords and ambition. Pretty in that sharp way that makes you stand up straighter. Dark hair always perfectly styled. Nails always perfect. Smile that never quite reached her eyes. I remember the first time David brought her home for Thanksgiving. Linda was still alive then, still healthy enough to spend 2 days preparing her famous cornbread stuffing. Victoria walked into our kitchen in Walnut Creek, looked around at Linda's handwritten recipe cards taped to the cabinets, at the 30-year-old KitchenAid mixer that still worked perfectly fine, at the linoleum floor we'd been meaning to replace since 1998. "It's so cozy," she said. Linda smiled and handed her an apron. Victoria looked at it like Linda had offered her a dead fish. "I don't really cook," Victoria said. "Allergies." She spent the rest of the day on her phone in the living room, while David helped us in the kitchen, sneaking bites of stuffing when Linda wasn't looking. Just like when he was 12. Some things, I thought, never change. I was wrong about that too. They got married in 2017. 6 months before Linda's diagnosis. Big wedding at the Claremont Hotel, $47,000 that I paid for because Victoria's parents were between investments and David was still finding his career path. I wrote the check without hesitating. That's what fathers do. The grandchildren came fast. Ethan in 2018, 3 months after Linda's funeral. Emma in 2020, right when the pandemic was making everyone crazy. 2 beautiful kids with David's eyes and Victoria's dark hair. For 3 years, those kids were my oxygen. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I drove the 45 minutes from Walnut Creek to their house in Pleasanton to pick them up from school. Every Saturday morning, I took them to breakfast at IHOP. Ethan always got chocolate chip pancakes. Emma always got the funny face with whipped cream and strawberries. Every Sunday after church, they'd come to my house, and we'd work on projects in my garage. Ethan was building a birdhouse. Emma was learning to paint. Normal grandparent stuff. The kind of memories I thought we'd be making for decades. I also helped with money. Not because they asked. David was doing well by then. Regional sales manager for a medical device company, pulling in $180,000 a year plus bonuses. But Victoria had expensive tastes and a talent for spending faster than David could earn. The small things added up. $3,200 to replace their dishwasher with a European model Victoria saw in a magazine. $8,500 for Emma's private preschool enrollment fee. $12,000 to renovate their master bathroom because Victoria found the original tile, dated. $15,000 for a family vacation to Hawaii that I wasn't invited to join. I kept a list in my desk drawer, not because I expected the money back, but because Linda had always taught me to know where every dollar went. By the end of 2023, that list totaled $127,340. I never mentioned it, never held it over their heads, never once said, "Remember when I paid for your new kitchen?" or "You're welcome for that vacation." That's not who I am. That's not who Linda raised me to be. But Victoria knew. She knew exactly how much I'd given them, down to the penny. I realize now that she was keeping her own list, not out of gratitude, but strategy. The red flags were there. They always are, aren't they? You just don't see them until you're looking backward. Flag 1. The cancellations started in September 2023. Ethan has soccer practice. Dad, can we reschedule? Emma's not feeling well. Maybe next week. By October, my Tuesdays and Thursdays were more empty than full. Flag 2. Victoria started answering David's phone. He's in a meeting. He's exhausted from work. He'll call you back. He never called back. Flag 3. Christmas 2023. I showed up with presents I'd spent weeks picking out. A telescope for Ethan because he'd gotten interested in stars. A complete watercolor set for Emma because she loved painting at my house. Victoria met me at the door. "The kids are overwhelmed with gifts," she said, not moving to let me in. "Maybe you could just leave those here. They'll open them later." I didn't see them open their gifts. I didn't get pictures. 3 days after Christmas, I found the telescope at a Goodwill donation center in Dublin. Still in the box. Still had my gift tag attached. Flag 4. Victoria's parents started showing up more. Frank and Diane, retired to a golf community in Scottsdale, suddenly couldn't stay away from their grandchildren. They got the holidays I was excluded from. They got the school plays I wasn't told about. They got the Saturday mornings that used to be mine. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself David was just busy, just stressed, just going through a phase. I told myself a lot of lies, because the truth was too painful to look at directly. The breaking point came on February 3rd, 2024. I remember the date because it was Linda's birthday. She would have been 68. I planned a small thing, just me and the grandkids visiting her grave, then ice cream at the shop she used to love. I cleared it with David 2 weeks in advance. Sounds nice, Dad. The kids would love that. I drove to their house at 10 a.m., wearing the blue sweater Linda had bought me our last Christmas together. I had flowers for her grave in the backseat, a small cake because Emma loved cake. Victoria opened the door before I could knock. She was dressed for yoga, hair in a perfect ponytail, face arranged in an expression I'd never seen her wear before. Honest. "Robert, the children aren't available today," David said. David and I discussed it further. We don't think cemetery visits are appropriate for children their age. It's morbid. It's their grandmother's birthday. Linda is dead, Robert. She said it like she was commenting on the weather. Dwelling on that isn't healthy for the children. Or for you, frankly. I stood there on the porch, flowers in hand, feeling my heart rate climb. Where's David? He's not available. Where are the kids? I want to say hello. They're not available either. She started to close the door. "I think it would be best if you called before coming over from now on. We need to establish some boundaries." I put my hand on the door, not pushing, just stopping it from closing. "Victoria, these are my grandchildren." "You can't just." "I can, actually." Her smile was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "This is my house, my children, my family. You're a guest in our lives, Robert. It's time you understood that." The door closed. I stood there for 3 full minutes, staring at the wood grain, listening to the muffled sound of my grandchildren's voices somewhere inside. Emma was laughing at something. Ethan was asking a question I couldn't quite hear. Normal sounds, family sounds, coming from a family I was suddenly locked out of. I drove to the cemetery alone, put the flowers on Linda's grave, sat on the bench across from her headstone and talked to her the way I had every week since she died. "What do I do?" I asked the granite. "She's taking them from me. She's turning David against me. What would you do?" Linda didn't answer. She never did. But I could hear her voice in my memory, clear as the day she said it. When someone shows you who they really are, Bobby, believe them the first time. Victoria had shown me exactly who she was. I believed her. On the drive home, I called my lawyer, Martin Reyes, the one who'd handled my business sale. We'd been friends for 30 years, ever since he'd done the contract for my first big pool installation. Marty, I said, I need you to look into something for me. My daughter-in-law, Victoria Chen. I need to know everything. Everything like what? Everything like everything. Where her money goes. What she does when David's at work. Who she talks to. All of it. There was a pause. Bobby, are you sure? This is your son's wife.
If he finds out you're investigating her, he won't find out. I turned onto the freeway, watching the exit for Pleasanton disappear in my rearview mirror. Not until I want him to. I hung up and drove home in silence. It was Linda's birthday. I was supposed to be eating ice cream with my grandkids, telling them stories about their grandmother, keeping her memory alive for another generation. Instead, I was planning surveillance on my own daughter-in-law. But something in Victoria's eyes when she closed that door told me I was right. Something was wrong in that house, and it wasn't just her dislike for me. I didn't know yet what I was looking for, but I was going to find it. 3 days after Linda's birthday, Martin Reyes called me at 7:15 in the morning. I was on my second cup of coffee, watching the fog burn off the hills behind my house, trying not to think about what Tuesday used to mean before Victoria changed the locks on my life. Bobby, we need to talk. In person. That bad. A pause. Martin was never a man who paused. That interesting. We met at a diner in Lafayette, one of those old-school places with vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it's been brewing since 1974. Martin was already there when I arrived, a manila folder sitting on the table in front of him like evidence at a trial. Before I show you this, he said, not touching his coffee, I need you to understand something. What I found, it's not conclusive. It's not proof of anything illegal. It's just patterns. Show me. He opened the folder. The first page was a credit report. Victoria's. I'd expected to see the usual. Mortgage, car payments, maybe some credit card debt from her shopping habits. What I saw instead made my coffee taste like ash. She has 7 credit cards, Martin said quietly. David's name isn't on any of them. I looked at the numbers. $12,400 on a Visa, $8,700 on a MasterCard, $15,200 on an American Express. The list went on. Total revolving debt, $67,340. David makes good money, I said slowly. Why would she need? Keep reading. The second page was a list of transactions from one of the cards. Purchases at stores I didn't recognize. Payments to a company called Serenity Wellness Partners, $3,200 every month like clockwork. Hotel charges in San Francisco. Restaurant bills for 2 at places David had mentioned Victoria going with her girlfriends. Serenity Wellness Partners, I said. What is that? Some kind of spa. Martin's face was carefully neutral. It's a private therapy and life coaching practice in Palo Alto. Very exclusive. Very expensive. Therapy. For what? That's the thing, Bobby. I made some calls. Serenity Wellness Partners doesn't do traditional therapy. They specialize in what they call relationship optimization and life transition coaching. I stared at him. I don't understand. Neither did I. So I dug deeper. He pulled out another page. The practice is run by a man named Dr. Marcus Webb, 47 years old, licensed psychologist, very charismatic. His specialty is working with women in unfulfilling marriages to help them optimize their outcomes. The coffee in my stomach turned to ice. You're saying Victoria is seeing some kind of, what? Divorce coach? I'm saying she's been paying this man $3,200 a month for the past 18 months. That's $57,600, Bobby. And based on some of the online reviews I found, reviews that have since been deleted, but the internet never really forgets. Dr. Webb's coaching often involves helping his clients extract maximum assets from their husbands before filing. I sat back in the booth, my mind racing. 18 months. She'd been planning something for 18 months. While I was paying for their bathroom renovation, their Hawaiian vacation, their children's school fees, Victoria was paying someone to teach her how to take everything David had. Everything I'd helped him build. There's more, Martin said. Of course there was. The third page was a property record. An apartment in Oakland, purchased 14 months ago for $425,000. Cash. The buyer's name was Victoria Chen. David doesn't know about this, I said. It wasn't a question. I doubt it. The address isn't connected to any of their joint accounts. She's using a P.O. box for all correspondence. And Bobby, Martin hesitated. The apartment isn't empty. He slid a photograph across the table. It was grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but the image was unmistakable. Victoria, walking into the apartment building with a rolling suitcase. The timestamp in the corner read January 15th, 2024. 3 weeks before she banned me from seeing my grandchildren. She goes there every Wednesday, Martin said. Like clockwork. Tells David she's at a yoga retreat or a spa day with friends. Stays overnight. Comes back Thursday afternoon. I picked up the photograph, studying my daughter-in-law's face. She was smiling. Not the tight, controlled smile she wore around David and me. This was a real smile. The kind of smile you wear when you're walking towards something you want. Or someone. Is she having an affair? I don't have proof of that. But I have this. Another photograph. This one showed a man leaving the same apartment building, approximately 30 minutes after Victoria had entered. Tall, well-dressed, silver hair. He was looking at his phone, not at the camera, but his profile was clear enough. Do you recognize him? Martin asked. I did. The cold feeling in my stomach spread to my chest. That's Frank, I said quietly. Victoria's father. The drive home took 45 minutes. I don't remember any of it. My mind was stuck on a loop, replaying every interaction I'd had with Victoria's parents over the years. Frank, the retired investment consultant with the golf tan and the easy laugh. Diane, always perfectly dressed, always making comments about how lucky David was to have found such a sophisticated woman. They'd been at the apartment, Victoria's secret apartment, the one her husband didn't know about. Why? The obvious answer was money. It was always money with the Holloway family. Frank's investment consulting had never seemed to generate much actual income, but they lived like they were wealthy. Country club membership, new cars every 2 years, vacations to Europe and the Caribbean. I'd assumed they had family money somewhere. Now I wasn't sure what to assume. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long time, watching the afternoon light change on my garage door. The garage where I'd taught Ethan to use a hammer. Where Emma had painted her first picture of our family. Stick figures with big smiles. Grandma Linda up in the clouds with angel wings. Those kids were in that house with Victoria. With a woman who was hiding an apartment. Hiding debt. Hiding meetings with her father that required secrecy. A woman who was paying someone to teach her how to destroy my son's life. And I couldn't warn David. Not yet. Not without proof he couldn't deny. Because I knew my son. I knew how much he loved his wife, how desperately he wanted to believe in the family they'd built. If I walked in with accusations and photographs, he wouldn't believe me. He'd believe her, and I'd lose any chance of protecting him and my grandchildren from whatever she was planning. I needed more. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I called my grandson. Ethan had just turned 6, old enough to have his own tablet, young enough to answer video calls without checking with his parents first. I called at 7:30 p.m., the time he was usually playing games before bed. His face lit up when he saw me. Grandpa. The word hit me like a punch to the chest. I hadn't heard it in weeks. Hey, buddy, how are you doing? Good. I lost a tooth, look. He grinned, showing me the gap where his front tooth used to be. The tooth fairy gave me $5. That's great, Ethan. $5 whole. I kept my voice steady, casual. Hey, is your mom around? His smile flickered, just for a second. She's in her office. She's always in her office now. Yeah. What's she doing in there? I don't know. Talking on the phone. She gets mad if we bother her. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. Emma tried to show her a drawing yesterday, and Mom yelled at her. Made her cry. I gripped the phone tighter. Your mom yelled at Emma? She yells a lot now. Dad says she's stressed about work stuff. He shrugged with the easy acceptance of childhood. Grandpa, when are you coming to visit? I want to show you my new Legos. Soon, buddy, I promise.
Mom says you're too busy to see us anymore. But that's not true, right? You're not too busy. The lie caught in my throat. No, Ethan.
I'm never too busy for you. Then why? Ethan. Victoria's voice, sharp and distant, cut through the call. Who are you talking to? His face went pale. Nobody, Mom. Just, give me that tab now.
The screen went blurry as Ethan moved, and then Victoria's face filled the frame. Her expression was thunderous. Robert, I thought I made myself clear about boundaries. I called to talk to my grandson.
There's no law against that. There are boundaries, which you clearly don't respect.
Her voice dropped to something cold and precise. If you contact my children again without my permission, I will get a restraining order.
Do you understand me?
Your children? Last I checked, they were David's children too. And my grandchildren. David agrees with me. We've discussed it. You're becoming unstable, Robert. Obsessive.
It's not healthy for the children to be around that kind of energy. Unstable, I repeated. That's an interesting choice of words. Something flickered across her face. Just for a moment. Fear, recognition.
Goodbye, Robert.
Don't call again. The screen went black.
I sat in my living room, phone in hand, heart pounding. She was already building a narrative. Unstable. Obsessive. The kind of words that showed up in custody hearings and restraining order applications.
She was planning something. And whatever it was, she needed me out of the picture first. The next morning, I called Martin again. I need you to find someone for me. A private investigator. Someone good. Someone who won't ask too many questions.
Bobby, I know a guy. But this is getting serious. If Victoria finds out you're investigating her, she won't.
Not until I'm ready. And when will that be?
I thought about Ethan's face when his mother's voice cut through our call. The fear that had replaced his smile. The casual way he'd mentioned that Emma had been yelled at, made to cry over a drawing.
When I have enough to make sure she never hurts my family again. Martin was quiet for a long moment. The investigator's name is Paula Vance. Former FBI. She's expensive, but she's the best. Money isn't an issue. Bobby. His voice softened.
Are you sure about this? Once you go down this road, there's no going back. Whatever you find, it's going to change everything. I looked at the photograph of Linda on my mantle. Her smile, her eyes, the way she'd always known what to do, even when I was lost. Everything's already changed, Marty. I'm just trying to find out why. I wrote down Paula Vance's number and hung up.
Outside my window, the February sun was trying to break through the clouds. Somewhere across the bay, my grandchildren were eating breakfast, going to school, living their lives without me.
4 months ago, I'd been their Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday grandfather. The pancake maker, the birdhouse builder, the keeper of their grandmother's stories. Now I was a threat to be managed, an obstacle to be removed. Victoria had made me her enemy.
She had no idea what kind of enemy I could be.
Paula Vance looked exactly like what you'd expect a former FBI agent to look like. Mid-50s, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. We met at her office in San Ramon, a nondescript suite in a building full of accountants and insurance agents. Mr. Chen, she didn't offer to shake hands. Martin Reyes gave me the broad strokes. You suspect your daughter-in-law of financial impropriety and possible fraud. I suspect her of a lot of things. I'm just not sure which ones are true yet. She nodded, pulling out a legal pad. Tell me everything. Start at the beginning. So I did.
The marriage, the money I'd given them,
the gradual exclusion from my grandchildren's lives, the secret credit cards, the hidden apartment, the mysterious meetings with her father. The divorce optimization coach charging $3,200 a month.
Paula wrote it all down without expression. When I finished, she looked up. You understand that what you're describing could be completely innocent. The apartment could be a rental investment. The meetings with her father could be family business. The debt could be poor financial planning. Could be, I agreed. But my gut says otherwise. Gut feelings don't hold up in court, Mr. Chen.
That's why I'm hiring you, to find evidence. She studied me for a long moment. And if I find evidence that your son's wife is exactly what she appears to be, a difficult woman with expensive tastes and boundary issues, but nothing more, then I'll apologize to her and move on with my life. Will you? I met her gaze. Mrs.
Vance, I've been in business for 34 years.
I didn't build a successful company by ignoring the numbers when they didn't add up. Right now, nothing about my daughter-in-law adds up. Either you find out why, or I do.
But I'd rather it be someone who knows what they're doing. The ghost of a smile crossed her face. Fair enough. My retainer is $15,000. I'll need access to everything Martin Reyes already pulled, plus anything else you can give me. Bank statements, photographs, dates, names. Everything. I pulled out my checkbook. When can you start? I already have. She took the check and slipped it into a drawer without looking at the amount. Tell me more about this Dr. Marcus Webb. The relationship optimization coach. I don't know much, just what Martin found online. Paula's expression sharpened. Dr. Marcus Webb was investigated by the California Board of Psychology in 2019 for inappropriate boundary violations with 3 separate clients. The investigation was dropped when all 3 women withdrew their complaints within the same week. Withdrew? Why would they do that? Because someone paid them to. Paula leaned forward. Mr.
Chen, I don't think your daughter-in-law is just getting divorce advice. I think she's part of something much bigger. And if I'm right, your grandchildren might be in more danger than you realize. The room suddenly felt very cold.
What kind of danger?
Paula's eyes were steady on mine. That's what I'm going to find out. Paula Vance called me exactly 1 week later, on February 17th at 6:42 in the evening.
I was reheating leftover Chinese food and pretending I wasn't staring at my phone every 5 minutes.
Mr. Chen, are you sitting down? I wasn't, but I found a chair fast. What did you find? More than I expected.
Less than I need. I heard papers shuffling on her end. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? There are things I need to show you in person. Things I don't want to discuss on the phone. That bad. That complicated. We agreed on 9 a.m. at her office. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face when Victoria's voice had cut through our call. The way his smile had disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. Whatever Paula had found, I needed to know. Even if it destroyed me. Her office looked different in the morning light. Smaller somehow, the walls closer together. Or maybe that was just my anxiety compressing everything into a tight, airless space. Paula was waiting with 2 cups of coffee and a folder thick enough to choke on. She slid 1 cup toward me and opened the folder without preamble. Let's start with Dr. Marcus Webb. The first page was a photograph. The man from the deleted online reviews. Mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, the kind of smile that probably worked wonders on vulnerable women. He was standing outside a building I didn't recognize, talking to someone just out of frame. Marcus Webb, born 1977 in Portland, Oregon. Licensed psychologist, specialty in relationship counseling and life transition therapy. On paper, he's legitimate. Good reviews, steady client base, never been successfully sued. You said he was investigated. Investigated, not charged. There's a difference. She pulled out another page. In 2019, 3 women filed complaints with the state board. All 3 claimed that Webb had encouraged them to hide assets from their husbands, coached them on how to provoke domestic incidents that could be used in custody battles, and in 2 cases, helped them falsify evidence of abuse. My stomach turned. Falsify evidence? Bruises that appeared at convenient times. Witnesses who remembered arguments that never happened. Text messages that were edited before being submitted to lawyers. Paula's voice was clinical, detached. Webb denied everything, called it a coordinated attack by bitter ex-husbands. The women withdrew their complaints, and the investigation died. You said someone paid them off. I said I suspected that. Now I'm certain. She slid another document across the desk. This is a bank record from one of the complainants. 3 days after she withdrew her statement, she received a wire transfer for $45,000 from a shell company registered in Delaware. The company's name was Serenity Holdings LLC. Serenity. The same name as Webb's practice. He paid them to shut up. Someone did. And here's where it gets interesting. Paula pulled out a corporate registration document. Serenity Holdings LLC was formed in 2017. The registered agent is a law firm in Wilmington that specializes in anonymous corporate structures. But every shell company has to have actual humans behind it somewhere. And I'm very good at finding them. She placed a photograph on top of the document. Frank Holloway, Victoria's father, standing outside an office building in San Francisco,
shaking hands with Marcus Webb. This was taken in 2018, Paula said. 6 months before Victoria started seeing Webb as a client.
Your father-in-law and the divorce optimization coach knew each other years before Victoria walked through his door. The coffee in my cup had gone cold. I hadn't touched it. What are you telling me? I'm telling you that Victoria's relationship with Marcus Webb isn't a coincidence. It's not a desperate woman finding a therapist who happens to be unethical. It's a business arrangement. Paula leaned back in her chair. Your daughter-in-law is part of a scheme, Mr. Chen, and her father is running it. The next hour was a masterclass in how to dismantle someone's life from the inside. Paula had traced the connections with the patience of someone defusing a bomb. Every wire led to another wire. Every name connected to another name. By the time she finished, I understood exactly what my daughter-in-law had been doing for the past 3 years. It started with Frank Holloway's debts. Your father-in-law filed for bankruptcy in 2015, Paula explained. Lost everything in a real estate deal that went south. His golf club membership, the cars, the vacation home in Scottsdale, all repossessed. He and Diane were living in a rental apartment in Phoenix, trying to figure out how to maintain appearances on Social Security. They told David they were retired, living the good life. They told David what they needed him to believe. Paula pulled out another document. In 2016, Frank connected with Marcus Webb through a mutual acquaintance. Webb had a proposition. He had access to wealthy men through their unhappy wives. Frank had a daughter who was single, ambitious, and beautiful. Why not work together? I felt sick. You're saying Frank set Victoria up with David on purpose. I'm saying the timeline is suggestive. Victoria met David in Seattle in 2016. They were engaged within 8 months, married within a year. During that time, Frank Holloway's financial situation mysteriously improved. New car, new apartment, golf club membership reinstated. He sold his daughter. He invested his daughter. There's a difference, at least in his mind. Paula's voice was flat. Victoria's job was to marry well and extract wealth from her husband and his family. Every dollar you gave them, Mr. Chen, went through Victoria's hands. And a significant portion of it ended up with her parents. I thought about the $127,340 I'd documented. The bathroom renovation, the Hawaiian vacation, the endless stream of small expenses that never seemed to stop. How much? Paula consulted her notes. Based on the financial records I've been able to access, I estimate that Frank and Diane Holloway have received approximately $89,000 over the past 3 years. Some directly from Victoria's accounts. Some laundered through the Oakland apartment. Some through Marcus Webb's practice as consulting fees. Nearly $90,000. Money I'd given to help my son's family. Funneled straight to the in-laws who smiled at me over Thanksgiving dinner while picking my pockets. And the apartment in Oakland. A staging ground. Victoria meets her father there every Wednesday to coordinate their efforts. They review David's finances, plan the next extraction, discuss the timeline. Timeline for what? Paula was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. For the divorce, Mr. Chen. Victoria is planning to leave your son, but not until she's positioned herself to take everything. The drive back to Walnut Creek took an hour in traffic. I don't remember changing lanes or stopping at lights. My body drove the car while my mind stayed behind in Paula's office, sorting through the wreckage of everything I thought I knew. Victoria wasn't just a difficult woman with expensive tastes. She was a con artist, a professional. She'd targeted my son the way a predator targets prey, carefully, patiently, with the full support of her family. And I'd helped her do it. Every check I wrote, every bill I covered, every time I said yes when I should have asked questions. I'd been feeding the machine that was designed to destroy David's life. But there was something else. Something Paula had said at the end of our meeting that I couldn't stop thinking about. The children, I'd asked her, where do they fit into this? Paula had hesitated. The first time I'd seen her uncertain about anything. That's what concerns me most, Mr. Chen. In a typical divorce, children are assets. Custody battles mean child support, which means ongoing income. Victoria would want full custody of Ethan and Emma, not because she loves them, but because they represent a steady stream of payments from David for the next 12 to 15 years. So she's using them as leverage. Yes, but there's something else. Paula had pulled out one final document. I've been monitoring Victoria's communications with Dr. Webb.
Most of it's encrypted, but some emails went through unsecured channels.
In one of them, Webb mentions something called the Henderson Protocol. What's that? I don't know yet, but the context suggests it's a specific strategy for cases involving children. And the way Webb talks about it, she paused, choosing her words carefully. He talks about it like it's extreme.
Like it's something they only use when the normal approach isn't working fast enough. What does that mean? It means that if Victoria feels threatened, if she thinks David is getting suspicious, or that someone is investigating her, she might
accelerate her timeline. And whatever the Henderson Protocol is, your grandchildren would be at the center of it. I'd left Paula's office with a folder full of evidence and a heart full of fear. Victoria had banned me from seeing Ethan and Emma. She'd called me unstable, obsessive, a threat to her children's well-being. Now I understood why. I wasn't a threat to her children. I was a threat to her plan. That night, I did something I hadn't done since Linda died. I prayed. Not to God, exactly. Linda had always been the religious one in our family. I'd gone to church with her every Sunday for 35 years. But I'd never felt whatever it was she felt when she closed her eyes and folded her hands. For me, it was just ritual. Comfortable, familiar, but empty. Now I knelt beside my bed like a child, hands pressed together, and talked to my wife. Linda, I don't know what to do. David's in danger. The kids are in danger. And I can't warn them without proof they'll believe. I can't just show up with a folder full of documents. Victoria will spin it as harassment, as obsession, as everything she's been calling me. David will choose her. He'll have to. She's the mother of his children. The house was silent.
No answer from the walls, or the ceiling, or the photograph on my nightstand. I need more time. I need more evidence. But Paula says Victoria might accelerate if she feels threatened. What if I'm already out of time? What if she's already planning something? I stayed on my knees until they ached. Until the February cold crept through the windows and made me shiver in my thin pajamas. When I finally stood up, I knew what I had to do.
I couldn't confront Victoria directly. I couldn't warn David, not yet. But I could do something I should have done months ago. I could watch. The next morning, I called Paula and told her to pause her investigation. Pause. Mr. Chen, we're just getting to the good stuff. I know. But you said Victoria might accelerate if she feels threatened. Right now, she thinks I'm just a bitter old man who calls his grandchildren too much. I want to keep it that way. So what's your plan? I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. Distance. Silence. The appearance of surrender. I looked out my window at the February gray. And while she thinks she's won, I'm going to watch. Every Wednesday when she goes to that apartment. Every time she meets with her father. Every move she makes. Paula was quiet for a moment. That's a long game, Mr. Chen. I built a business over 34 years. I know how to play long games. And if she makes her move before you're ready. I thought about Ethan's face. Emma's laugh. The way they used to run to me when I pulled into their driveway, like I was the most important person in the world. Then I'll be there to catch them when she drops them. Paula made a sound that might have been approval. I'll keep my sources active. Background monitoring only. If anything changes, anything at all, I'll let you know. Thank you, Paula. Don't thank me yet. We're a long way from the end of this story. She hung up. I put down the phone and walked to my kitchen, where the folder of evidence sat on my table like a bomb waiting to explode. I knew more than Victoria thought I knew. I knew about the scheme, the debt, the apartment, the meetings with her father. I knew about Dr. Marcus Webb and his divorce optimization, and the women who'd been paid to withdraw their complaints. But I still didn't know enough. I didn't know what the Henderson Protocol was. I didn't know when Victoria planned to make her move. And I didn't know what she was willing to do to my grandchildren to get what she wanted. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence. I didn't call David. I didn't text. I didn't drive by their house, or show up at Ethan's school, or try to catch glimpses of Emma at her dance class. I became a ghost. And in the silence, I watched. Every Wednesday at 10:15 a.m., Victoria's car left the Pleasanton house and drove to Oakland. I knew because I'd hired a second investigator, a retired cop named Danny Reyes, Martin's cousin, to follow her. Danny sent me updates by text, photographs of Victoria entering the apartment building, timestamps of when she arrived and when she left. Confirmation that Frank Holloway's rental car was parked in the lot every single time. They were planning something. I could feel it in my bones. On March 8th, Danny sent me a photograph that changed everything. Victoria leaving the Oakland apartment. Frank beside her, carrying a briefcase. And behind them, just visible through the building's glass doors, a third figure. A woman I'd never seen before. Blonde, professional, carrying a folder that looked like legal documents. Danny's text arrived 30 seconds later, unknown female. Followed her after. She went to the Alameda County Courthouse. Family Law Division. Family law. Divorce. Custody. The machinery of ending a marriage and dividing children like property. Victoria wasn't just planning anymore. She was executing. I called Paula immediately. The Henderson Protocol, I said without preamble. I need to know what it is. Now. Mr. Chen, I've been trying to. Now, Paula. She's already at the courthouse. She's filing something. I need to know what I'm dealing with. A pause. Then Paula's voice, stripped of its professional calm for the first time since I'd met her. I found a reference last night. I was going to call you this morning. She took a breath. The Henderson Protocol is named after a case in Ohio from 2018. A woman named Karen Henderson who was going through a custody battle with her ex-husband. What happened? She accused him of child abuse. Sexual abuse. Said her daughter had made disclosures during therapy sessions with Dr. Marcus Webb. My blood turned to ice. The accusations were false, completely fabricated. Webb had coached the child during their sessions, planted memories, created evidence that didn't exist. By the time the father proved his innocence, he'd lost his job, his reputation, and 18 months of his daughter's life. Karen Henderson got full custody and a restraining order that kept him away from his child until she was 16. I couldn't breathe. You're telling me Victoria might accuse David of? I'm telling you that the Henderson Protocol is Webb's nuclear option. When a clean divorce isn't enough, when the target has too many resources, too much support, too many people who might believe him over his wife. Paula's voice was heavy. They destroy the man completely. And they use the children to do it. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. My son, my grandchildren, the family I'd spent my entire life building and protecting. And Victoria was about to burn it all to the ground. I didn't sleep for 3 days. The Henderson Protocol. The words echoed in my skull like a death sentence. False accusations of child abuse. Coached testimony from my own grandchildren. My son's life destroyed by lies whispered into the ears of children too young to understand they were being used as weapons. And somewhere across the bay, Victoria was preparing the battlefield. On the third night, at 2:47 a.m., I finally admitted to myself what I had to do. I had to warn David. Not with folders full of evidence. Not with accusations he'd dismiss as the ravings of a bitter, excluded father. I needed to plant a seed. Something small enough to seem innocent, but powerful enough to make him look at his wife with new eyes. I needed to make him doubt. The opportunity came on March 15th. David called me for the first time in 6 weeks. I was so surprised to see his name on my screen that I almost didn't answer. Dad? His voice sounded tired, defeated. Do you have a minute? For you? Always. A pause. I heard him breathing, heard what might have been Victoria's voice in the background, muffled and sharp. Then a door closing. I'm in my car, he said. In the garage. She doesn't know I'm calling you. My heart rate spiked. Is everything okay? No. I mean, I don't know. I just. Another pause. Dad, I'm sorry about Christmas. About everything. Victoria said it was better for the kids if we kept some distance, but I've been thinking, and it doesn't feel right. You're my father. You should be able to see your grandchildren. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay calm. I appreciate that, son. I've been wanting to call for weeks, but every time I bring it up, Victoria gets this look. Like I'm betraying her by even mentioning your name. And then last night, she said something that, he trailed off. What did she say? She said maybe it was time to reevaluate our family structure. She used those exact words. Reevaluate our family structure. And when I asked what she meant, she said we'd talk about it when her lawyer finished the paperwork. I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles went white. Her lawyer. She said it's just estate planning stuff, making sure the kids are protected if something happens to one of us.
But Dad, she's been acting strange for months. Staying out late, always on her phone, locking herself in her office for hours at a time.
And the credit card bills, he exhaled sharply. I found a statement she'd hidden in her desk. $67,000 in debt on cards I didn't even know existed. The exact number Paula had given me. David, listen to me carefully. I kept my voice steady, fatherly, concerned but not alarmist. I think you need to talk to your own lawyer. Not about divorce. Just about protecting yourself. Making sure your assets are documented, your accounts are secure. Do you understand? You think she's planning something. I think you should be prepared for any possibility. Silence. I could almost hear him wrestling with the implications. Dad, Victoria loves me. We have our problems, but she wouldn't. He stopped. Would she? I don't know, son. I only know what I've observed, and what you've just told me. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. Have you noticed anything different about the kids lately? What do you mean? Are they acting strangely? Saying things that don't sound like them? Has Victoria started taking them to new activities? New therapists? Anything like that? Another silence. Longer this time. She enrolled Emma in play therapy last month. Said Emma was having anxiety about school. I thought it was a good idea. Play therapy. The same technique Marcus Webb had used on the Henderson girl. Coaching children through play to implant memories that never happened. Who's the therapist? I don't know. Victoria handles all that stuff. She said his name was Marcus, I think. Dr. Marcus something. The room tilted. David. My voice came out harder than I intended. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do not let Victoria take Emma to another session with that therapist. Do you understand me? Not one more session. Dad, what are you talking about? It's just play therapy. Emma likes it. She says, Doctor. Marcus gives her stickers and lets her draw pictures. What kind of pictures? I don't know. Houses, families, normal kid stuff. Why are you? David, please. Trust me on this. Tell Victoria that Emma seems better, that you don't think she needs the therapy anymore. Whatever you have to say, but get Emma away from that man. You're scaring me, Dad. Good. You should be scared. I took a breath, forcing myself to pull back. I was pushing too hard, too fast. If I panicked him now, he'd go straight to Victoria, and she'd accelerate everything. Look, I'm probably overreacting. I've read some things about certain therapists who don't have children's best interests at heart. It's probably nothing. But humor your old man, okay? Just ask a few questions. Find out more about this Dr. Marcus. Look him up online. That's all I'm asking. A long pause. Okay, David said finally. I'll look into it. But Dad, if you know something I should know, you need to tell me. No more hints and implications. I'm a grown man, I can handle the truth. I know you can, son. And when I have the truth, the whole truth, I'll tell you everything. I promise. Okay. He sounded uncertain, but the suspicion had been planted. The seed was in the ground. I should go. Victoria will wonder where I am. David, one more thing. Yeah? I love you. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone tells you about me, remember that I love you, and I have always acted in your best interest. Always. I love you too, Dad. The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen, phone in hand, heart pounding. I'd done it. I'd warned him without warning him, planted doubt without making accusations. Now I just had to hope he'd follow through, that he'd look into Marcus Webb and discover what I already knew, and that Victoria wouldn't realize what was happening until it was too late. 2 days later, Paula called with news that made everything worse. I found the Henderson case files, she said without preamble. The complete record, including the sealed documents from the custody hearing. How did you get sealed documents? You don't want to know. Her voice was grim. But you need to hear this. Karen Henderson, the woman who used the protocol to destroy her ex-husband, she didn't act alone. Webb was just the therapist. The mastermind behind the entire operation was a consultant named Frank Holloway. The phone nearly slipped from my fingers. Victoria's father ran the Henderson case. Designed it, orchestrated it, collected a percentage of the settlement. Paula's voice was flat with disgust. And that's not all. I found 3 other cases with the same pattern. Different states, different names, but the same playbook.
A wealthy husband, a wife connected to Webb's practice, accusations of abuse, and Frank Holloway pulling strings in the background. How much money are we talking about? Combined,
over $4 million in divorce settlements, plus ongoing child support payments. She paused. They've been doing this for at least 8 years, Mr. Chen. Your son isn't their first victim. He's just their latest. I walked to my window, looking out at the hills I'd watched every morning for 30 years. The view hadn't changed, but everything else had. What about Victoria? Has she done this before? Victoria appears to be a first-time operator. Her father brought her into the business after the 2018 bankruptcy, training her, essentially. Paula's tone softened slightly. I don't think Victoria is a sociopath, Mr. Chen. I think she's a damaged woman who was groomed by her father to see marriage as a transaction and men as targets. It doesn't excuse what she's doing, but it might explain it. I don't care about her psychology. I care about my grandchildren. I understand. And that's why you need to know about the timeline. Papers rustled on her end. Based on the pattern from previous cases, the accusation phase typically begins 8 to 12 weeks after the child starts therapy with Webb. Emma has been seeing him for approximately 6 weeks. So we have 2 to 6 weeks before Victoria makes her move. Possibly less. The woman at the courthouse. I identified her. Her name is Sandra Chen, no relation to you. And she's a family law attorney who specializes in emergency custody petitions. The kind you file when you need to remove children from a home immediately. Emergency custody based on what? Based on accusations of abuse, Mr. Chen. Accusations that haven't been made yet, but that Victoria is clearly preparing. I lean my forehead against the cold glass of the window. What do I do, Paula? If I go to David with this, Victoria will know I've been investigating her. She'll accelerate the timeline, file her petition tomorrow, and my grandchildren will be in her custody before I can prove anything. There's another option. Paula's voice was careful. We could go to the authorities. The FBI investigates schemes like this. Wire fraud, conspiracy, coaching false testimony. If we bring them what we have, they'll open an investigation that takes months. Years, maybe. And in the meantime, Victoria proceeds with her plan. I close my eyes. There has to be another way. There might be. Paula hesitated. I've been thinking about the apartment in Oakland, the one where Victoria meets with her father every Wednesday. What about it? It's the nerve center of their operation. All their planning happens there. And based on my surveillance, they're not particularly careful about security. No cameras in the hallway, standard locks on the doors, and they always meet at the same time. You're suggesting I break in. I'm suggesting nothing of the kind. That would be illegal. A pause. But if someone were to gain access to that apartment while Victoria and Frank were, say, distracted by a minor emergency elsewhere, they might find documentation that would be very useful in stopping this scheme before it destroys your son's life. I understood what she was saying, and I understood the risks. Breaking and entering. Theft of private documents. If I was caught, I'd go to prison. Victoria would use it as proof of my instability. And my grandchildren would be lost to me forever. But if I did nothing, they'd be lost anyway. Lost to a woman who saw them as assets to be leveraged. Lost to a grandfather who'd been erased from their lives. Lost to a system that Victoria had learned to manipulate with expert precision. What kind of emergency? I asked. Frank Holloway drives a 2022 BMW 530i, nice car. Expensive. The kind of car that would be very distressing to find, with 4 flat tires, and a broken window in a parking garage in downtown Oakland. And while he's dealing with that, Victoria would naturally stay with him. It's a dangerous neighborhood. She wouldn't leave her elderly father alone with a damaged vehicle. Paula's voice was perfectly neutral. That would give someone approximately 45 minutes to an hour alone in the apartment. I thought about Linda, about what she would say if she could see me now, planning a burglary to save our grandchildren from our own daughter-in-law. She would tell me to be careful, but she would also tell me to do whatever it took. When? I asked. This Wednesday, March 20th. I'll have a team in place for the distraction. You'll need to be ready to move fast. I'll be ready. Mr. Chen, Paula's voice softened. If this goes wrong, then it goes wrong. But at least I'll have tried. I hung up and walked to my bedroom, where Linda's photograph sat on my nightstand. 35 years of marriage, 1 son, 2 grandchildren, everything I had in this world, threatened by people who saw my family as nothing more than a source of income. I'm going to fix this, I told her picture. Whatever it takes. The photograph didn't answer, but I could have sworn I saw her smile.
The next 4 days were the longest of my life. I prepared like I was planning a military operation, bought a burner phone, memorized the layout of Victoria's apartment building from Danny's surveillance photos, practiced picking a standard door lock on my own front door until I could do it in under 30 seconds. I felt ridiculous. A 62-year-old pool builder, learning to pick locks like some kind of spy.
But every time the absurdity threatened to overwhelm me, I thought about Emma in play therapy with Marcus Webb, drawing pictures of houses and families, being coached to remember things that never happened. And the absurdity faded into cold, focused determination. On Tuesday night, Paula called with the final details. Danny will be in position at 9:45 a.m. He'll disable Frank's car at 10 o'clock, just as Victoria typically arrives. They'll discover the damage at approximately 10:10 when they try to leave for their usual lunch at 11. What if they don't go to lunch? What if they stay in the apartment? They never stay. Part of their routine is being seen in public together, building the appearance of a normal father-daughter relationship. Danny will call me when they leave the building, and I'll text you the all clear. And if something goes wrong, then you walk away. No heroics, no confrontation. You disappear, and we find another approach. I agreed, but we both knew I was lying. If I got into that apartment and found evidence that could save my grandchildren, nothing short of physical force was going to make me leave empty-handed. Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold. I drove to Oakland in my old work truck, the one I'd used for job sites before I sold the business. It was nondescript, forgettable, exactly the kind of vehicle no one looked at twice in a neighborhood full of contractors and delivery drivers. I parked 3 blocks from Victoria's apartment building and waited. At 10:07 a.m., my burner phone buzzed. A text from Paula. Bird is in the nest. Package delivered. Danny had done his job. The BMW was disabled. At 10:23, another text. Birds leaving the nest. Flying east. Victoria and Frank were heading to deal with the car. The apartment was empty. I got out of my truck and walked. The building was a converted warehouse, gentrified into expensive lofts with exposed brick and industrial windows. The kind of place that screamed urban professional, while charging San Francisco rents in Oakland. Victoria's unit was on the 3rd floor, number 312. I slipped in behind a delivery driver who was propping the front door open with his foot while juggling packages. He didn't even glance at me. Just another resident coming home in the middle of the day. The elevator took forever. I watched the numbers climb. 1, 2, 3, and felt my heart hammering against my ribs. The hallway was empty. Silent. Unit 312 was at the end, near a window that looked out over the street. I could see Danny's position from here. A black van parked across the way, ready to warn me if Victoria and Frank returned early. I pulled out my lockpicks. The lock was exactly what Paula had described. Standard deadbolt. No security chain. No alarm system. Why would there be? This was supposed to be a secret. No one was supposed to know it existed. 32 seconds. A new personal record. The door swung open, and I stepped into my daughter-in-law's hidden life. The apartment was immaculate. Modern furniture, neutral colors, the kind of generic good taste that came from hiring a decorator rather than living a real life. No family photos on the walls. No children's drawings on the refrigerator. No evidence that this place had any connection to the woman who was supposed to be a devoted mother to my grandchildren. Instead, there was a home office. A real one, not the converted corner of a bedroom, but an entire room dedicated to the business of destroying families. I stood in the doorway, staring at the filing cabinets, the computer, the whiteboard covered in names and dates and dollar figures. It looked like a war room, because that's exactly what it was. I started with the filing cabinet. The first drawer was labeled completed. Inside, I found folders for 8 different families, 8 different couples who had been targeted, manipulated, and separated. 8 husbands whose lives had been destroyed by accusations of abuse that existed only in the minds of their coached children. The second drawer was labeled active. There were 3 folders inside. The first 2 were names I didn't recognize, families somewhere else in California,
going through the same nightmare that was being prepared for my son. The third folder was labeled Chen, David. I pulled it out with shaking hands and opened it on Victoria's desk. Everything was there. Financial records showing exactly how much I'd given them over the years. My number was wrong, apparently, because their total was $312,847, including the down payment, and the money they claimed was for emergencies. A timeline of their relationship, with notes about when Victoria had first identified David as a target and how she'd engineered their chance meeting in Seattle. And worst of all, a section labeled Exit Strategy. I read it with growing horror. Phase 1. Isolation. Separate D from support network, particularly father. Father is primary threat due to financial knowledge and emotional bond with grandchildren. Complete. Phase 2. Documentation. Establish pattern of concerning behavior from D. Minor incidents only. Build paper trail. In progress. Phase 3. Therapy. Enroll E in sessions with MW. Begin memory work. Sessions 1 to 4 complete. Moving to implantation phase. Phase 4. Disclosure. E makes statement to mandated reporter, school counselor. Statement triggers CPS investigation and emergency custody petition. Phase 5. Extraction. D removed from home. Full custody to V. Asset division per prenup, null, and California community property law. Estimated settlement. $2.2 million plus child support $4,200 per month for 12 years. I photographed every page with my burner phone. The financial records, the timeline, the exit strategy, every piece of evidence that proved what Victoria was planning to do to my son. Then I found the recordings. A USB drive in the bottom drawer, labeled E-Sessions, NW. I plugged it into Victoria's computer and opened the first file. Emma's voice filled the room. My granddaughter, 5 years old, talking to a man whose voice I didn't recognize, but whose name I knew too well. Emma, can you tell me about the bad touching again? I don't remember any bad touching. That's okay, sweetheart. Sometimes our brains hide scary memories to protect us. But if you try really hard, you might remember. Like when we played the remembering game last week. Can you close your eyes and try? Okay. Good girl. Now think about bedtime at your house. Think about when Daddy comes to tuck you in. What does Daddy do? He reads me a story and gives me a kiss on my forehead. Does he ever do anything else? Anything that makes you feel funny in your tummy? No. Are you sure? Sometimes daddies do things that feel wrong, but they tell us it's a secret. Does Daddy ever tell you secrets? I stopped the recording. I couldn't breathe. This was it. The evidence that Marcus Webb was actively coaching my granddaughter to accuse her father of abuse. The evidence that Victoria knew about it, had planned it, had hired someone to do this to her own daughter. And I had it all on my phone. I was reaching for the USB drive when my burner phone buzzed. A text from Paula. Abort. Birds returning. Get out. Now. Victoria was coming back. I shoved the USB drive in my pocket, closed the filing cabinet, and ran for the door. I made it to the stairwell just as the elevator chimed. Victoria's voice echoed through the hallway. I don't understand how all 4 tires could be flat. That's not an accident, Daddy. I know, sweetheart. I know. Frank sounded rattled. We'll deal with it. The insurance will cover everything. It's not about the money. It's about the timing. What if someone is watching us? I pressed myself against the wall of the stairwell, heart slamming against my ribs. Through the small window in the fire door, I could see them walking toward the apartment. Victoria was checking her phone. Frank was wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. They were 20 feet away. 15. 10. Victoria stopped at the door to 312 and pulled out her keys. Frank was still talking. Something about calling the police, about filing a report. But Victoria wasn't listening. She was staring at the door with an expression I couldn't read. Daddy, she said quietly. Did you lock the door when we left? My stomach dropped. Of course I did. I always lock the door. Then why is it unlocked now? I didn't wait to hear Frank's answer. I took the stairs 3 at a time, my knees screaming in protest, the USB drive burning in my pocket like a live coal. Behind me, I heard Victoria's voice rise in alarm. Then footsteps. Then the stairwell door slamming open 1 floor above me. Someone's been here. Daddy, someone's been in the apartment. I hit the ground floor and burst through the emergency exit into the alley behind the building. The alarm started wailing immediately, a high, piercing shriek that would bring security within minutes. But I was already running, lungs burning, legs pumping, adrenaline carrying me faster than I'd moved in decades. Danny's van was waiting at the end of the block. The side door slid open before I reached it, and hands pulled me inside.
We were moving before I even got my balance. "You okay?" Danny's voice came from the driver's seat. "You look like you've seen a ghost."
I sat on the floor of the van, gasping for breath, clutching my phone and the USB drive like they were the only things keeping me alive. I found it, I managed. Everything.
The whole plan. Did they see you? I don't think so, but they know someone was there. Danny was quiet for a moment, navigating through Oakland traffic with the calm of someone who'd done this kind of thing before.
Then the clock just started ticking, Mr. Chen. Whatever you're going to do with what you found, you'd better do it fast. Paula met me at her office an hour later. I was still shaking, still running on fading adrenaline and cold fear. She took one look at me and poured a glass of whiskey from a bottle in her desk drawer. "Drink this, then show me what you got." I drank. Then I handed her my phone and the USB drive.
She spent the next 45 minutes going through the photographs, listening to the recordings, reading the documents I'd captured. Her face remained neutral throughout, but I saw her jaw tighten when she heard Marcus Webb's voice coaching Emma to remember things that never happened.
"This is everything," she said finally. "Financial records, timeline, exit strategy, and recorded evidence of a licensed therapist coaching false memories into a child. This is enough to put Marcus Webb in prison, enough to destroy Frank Holloway's operation,
and enough to stop Victoria's plan before she can execute it. So we go to the police." Paula hesitated. "We could, but there's a problem." "What problem?" "We have proof. We have proof that was obtained through illegal entry into a private residence."
She met my eyes. "Nothing you found in that apartment is admissible in court, Mr. Chen.
If we take this to the police,
The first thing Victoria's lawyer will do is file a motion to suppress, and they'll win. Then Victoria will know exactly what we have, and she'll adjust her strategy accordingly. So what was the point? Why did we do this if we can't use any of it? We can't use it in court." Paula leaned forward. "But we can use it in other ways. Ways that don't involve the legal system. Such as showing it to your son." I stared at her.
"David?
"He's the key to all of this, Mr. Chen. Victoria's entire plan depends on David being blindsided, on him not knowing what's coming until it's too late to fight back."
But if David knows what his wife is planning, if he hears those recordings, sees those documents, he can take action before she does." "What kind of action?" "He can file for divorce first. He can pull Emma out of therapy immediately. He can document Victoria's secret apartment, her hidden debt, her meetings with her father. All of that is information he's entitled to as her husband, and once he has it through legitimate means, he can use it to protect himself and his children." I thought about my conversation with David, the doubt I'd planted, the questions I'd encouraged him to ask. He's already suspicious. I talked to him last week, told him to look into Marcus Webb.
"Did he?" "I don't know. He hasn't called me back." Paula nodded slowly. "Then that's your next step. You need to talk to your son, show him what you found.
Make him understand what's at stake.
And if he doesn't believe me, if he thinks I'm just a bitter old man trying to destroy his marriage, then you'll have done everything you could." Paula's voice was gentle but firm. "But I don't think that's what will happen. Your son called you, Mr. Chen. He's already questioning things. He just needs someone to show him the truth." I looked at the USB drive sitting on her desk. My granddaughter's voice was on that drive, her innocence being systematically corrupted by a man who saw her as nothing more than a tool. "Set up a meeting," I said. "Somewhere private. Somewhere Victoria won't know about. I'll make the arrangements." The meeting happened 2 days later, on Friday, March 22nd. Paula had suggested a location outside the Bay Area, somewhere we could talk without worrying about Victoria's surveillance or Frank's connections. We settled on a small town called Grass Valley, 2 hours northeast of Sacramento, where Paula had a contact who owned a cabin in the woods. David arrived first. I watched him pull into the gravel driveway from inside the cabin, his face tight with confusion and something that looked like fear. He sat in his car for a full minute before getting out, staring at the cabin like it might explode. I met him at the door. "Dad."
He looked around at the trees, the isolation, the complete absence of anyone else.
What is this? What's going on? Come inside, son. We need to talk. I started at the beginning.
Not with the evidence, not with the recordings, not with anything that would sound like accusations. I started with Linda's birthday, with the door closing in my face, with the slowly dawning realization that something in my son's house was very, very wrong. David listened without interrupting. His face went through stages: confusion, denial, anger, and finally something that looked like grief. By the time I finished describing what I'd found in Victoria's apartment, he was sitting with his head in his hands. "This can't be true," he said quietly. "She loves me. She loves the kids."
She wouldn't. David, I need you to listen to something. I pulled out my phone and opened the first recording. This is Emma, in a therapy session with Marcus Webb. I pressed play. My granddaughter's voice filled the cabin, innocent, trusting, being asked leading questions by a man who was paid to destroy her father. "Does Daddy ever do anything that makes you feel funny in your tummy?" "No." "Are you sure?" "Sometimes daddies do things that feel wrong, but they tell us it's a secret." David's face went white, then red, then something beyond color entirely. The look of a man whose entire world was collapsing around him. "Turn it off," he whispered. I stopped the recording. "There are 6 more sessions on that drive," I said quietly, "each one more aggressive than the last. Webb is teaching Emma to remember things that never happened, David. Things that would destroy your life if she ever repeated them to a teacher or a counselor." "Why?" His voice cracked. "Why would Victoria do this?" I showed him the exit strategy document, the financial calculations, the estimated settlement of $2.2 million plus 12 years of child support. "Because you're worth more to her divorced than married. Because her father trained her to see marriage as a business transaction. And you're the biggest payday they've ever had." David read the document 3 times. I watched his eyes move across the words, watched the truth sink in like poison. "The apartment in Oakland," he said finally. "The secret credit cards. The way she's been acting for months." He looked up at me with devastated eyes. I thought I was imagining things. I thought I was being paranoid. "You weren't imagining anything, son. You were seeing what was really there. You just didn't want to believe it." He stood up abruptly, walked to the window, stared out at the forest. "What do I do?" His voice was barely audible. "If I confront her, she'll know I know. She'll accelerate whatever she's planning. And Emma, God, Dad, what has she been telling my daughter? That's why you can't confront her." "Not yet." I walked to stand beside him. "Paula has a plan. It requires you to act normally for the next few weeks while we build a case that Victoria can't escape. But it means playing a role, David. Pretending everything is fine while you document everything she does. I don't know if I can do that. Look at her across the breakfast table, knowing she's been plotting to destroy me. You can do it for Emma." "For Ethan." I put my hand on his shoulder. "For the next few weeks, you're not David the husband. You're David the father. And you'll do whatever it takes to protect your children." He was quiet for a long moment. When he turned to face me, something had changed in his eyes. The confusion was gone. The grief was still there, but it had hardened into something else. Determination. "Tell me the plan," he said. Paula had mapped it out like a military campaign. Step 1. Documentation. David would start gathering evidence through legitimate means. Screenshots of Victoria's hidden credit card statements. Records of her Wednesday spa days. Bank account activity that showed where the money was really going. Step 2. Legal protection. Paula had a contact, a family law attorney named Sandra Morrison, who had built her career destroying people like Marcus Webb. Sandra would file sealed documents protecting David's assets and establishing his version of events before Victoria could file her emergency petition. Step 3. Emma's safety. This was the most delicate part. David couldn't pull Emma out of therapy without alerting Victoria, but he could request copies of Webb's session notes, something he was legally entitled to as her father. When Webb refused or provided falsified notes, it would create a paper trail of his misconduct. Step 4. The confrontation. Once everything was in place, David would present Victoria with a choice: walk away quietly with a standard divorce settlement, or face criminal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and child endangerment. It's not enough to stop her. Paula had explained during our planning session. We need to make sure she can never do this to anyone else. That means exposing Marcus Webb and destroying Frank Holloway's operation.
Victoria will cooperate when she realizes the alternative is prison. David had listened to the plan with growing resolve. By the end, he was asking questions about timelines and evidence and legal procedures. The desperate husband was transforming into something else, a strategist, a protector, a man who finally understood the stakes. How long? He asked. For weeks, Paula said. Maybe less if we move fast. And what about my father? David looked at me. Victoria's been trying to cut him out of our lives for months. If she finds out he's involved in this, I'll stay in the background, I said. You're the one who needs to be visible. Building the case, protecting the kids. I'll do what I can from the shadows. David nodded slowly. Then he did something that broke my heart and healed it at the same time. He hugged me.
Not a quick, masculine pat on the back. A real hug. The kind he used to give me when he was a boy and something scared him. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered. I'm sorry I let her come between us. I'm sorry I believed her instead of trusting you. It's okay, son. I held him tight, feeling years of distance dissolve between us. You're believing me now.
That's what matters.
The next morning, David drove back to Pleasanton to begin his role as the unsuspecting husband. I watched him go with a mixture of pride and terror. My son was walking into a house full of vipers, armed with nothing but knowledge and a plan. If Victoria suspected anything, she would strike first and strike hard.
The Henderson Protocol was designed for exactly this situation, when a target started getting suspicious. But David wasn't just any target. He was my son, and he had spent 32 years watching his father build something from nothing, navigating problems, finding solutions, never giving up even when the odds seemed impossible. He could do this. He had to do this. For Emma. For Ethan. For the family we were fighting to save. I drove home to Walnut Creek in the late morning light, the USB drive still in my pocket, the weight of everything we'd set in motion pressing down on my shoulders. In 4 weeks, this would all be over. Victoria would be exposed, Webb would be destroyed, and my grandchildren would be safe. 4 weeks. I just had to hope we had that long. 3 days later, Victoria made her move. I was in my kitchen, making dinner and listening to the radio when my phone rang. David's number. My heart jumped. We'd agreed to minimize contact to avoid Victoria's suspicion, so a call meant something had happened. Dad. His voice was tight, controlled. I need you to listen carefully and not react. What's wrong? Victoria filed the petition this morning. Emergency custody. She's claiming I'm a danger to the children. The kitchen tilted around me. That's impossible. We had 4 weeks. We had a plan.
She found something. I don't know what. But she came home yesterday afternoon and she was different. Cold. Calculating. And this morning she was gone before I woke up.
By the time I got to work, I had 3 missed calls from a lawyer I've never heard of telling me that my wife had filed for emergency protection. Where are the kids? With Victoria. She picked them up from school early. I don't know where they are.
His voice cracked. She's taken my children, Dad. And she's telling everyone I'm a monster. I gripped the phone so hard I thought it might shatter. David, listen to me. We're not done.
We still have the evidence. We still have Paula. We still have Sandra Morrison.
This changes the timeline, not the outcome. You don't understand. The petition, it includes statements from Emma.
Things she supposedly told the school counselor this morning. Things about me doing. Things I would never do. They're lies, Dad. All of it. But no one's going to believe me now. The Henderson Protocol. Activated ahead of schedule. Victoria must have realized something was wrong and pulled the trigger early. Which meant Emma had been taken to a school counselor this morning and coached to repeat the false memories Webb had been planting for weeks. My 5-year-old granddaughter had been used as a weapon against her own father. And I had only one way to stop it.
David, I said quietly, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Yes. Then go home, wait for my call.
And whatever happens in the next 24 hours, remember that I love you, and I'm doing this to protect our family. Dad, what are you going to do? I looked at the USB drive sitting on my kitchen counter.
The evidence that couldn't be used in court. The recordings that would be suppressed. The proof of Victoria's crimes that no judge would ever be allowed to hear. But there were other ways to use evidence. Ways that didn't involve judges at all.
I'm going to end this,
I said. Tonight. I called Paula at 8:47 p.m. Victoria filed early, emergency custody petition, she's claiming David abused Emma. Paula's response was immediate, professional. How long ago? This morning.
She had Emma make statements to the school counselor. The Henderson Protocol. She executed it ahead of schedule. A pause. I could hear Paula thinking, recalculating, adjusting. Something spooked her. She must have found evidence that David was investigating, or that someone had been in the apartment. Another pause. The lock. She noticed the lock was unlocked when she came back. She knew someone had been inside. It doesn't matter how she knew. What matters is stopping her before she destroys my son. The legal route is compromised now, Mr. Chen. With an active CPS investigation and emergency custody petition, anything we do will look like retaliation. Victoria's lawyers will spin it as harassment, as proof that your family is dangerous and unstable. Then we don't use the legal route. Silence on the line. What exactly are you proposing? I looked at the USB drive in my hand, the recordings. The documents, the proof of everything Victoria and her father had done. Marcus Webb has a practice in Palo Alto. He sees clients there every day. Women who trust him with their secrets, their marriages, their children. Yes. What would happen if those women heard what he really does? If they heard recordings of him coaching a 5-year-old to accuse her father of abuse? That would be defamation. Webb would sue you into oblivion. It's not defamation if it's true. Paula was quiet for a long moment. You're talking about going public, exposing Webb directly outside the legal system. I'm talking about burning down the whole operation. Webb, Frank Holloway, Victoria, all of it. Make it so public, so undeniable, that no court in the country could ignore it. And how exactly would you do that? I thought about the resources I had, the money from selling my business, the contacts I'd built over 34 years in the Bay Area, the journalists who'd covered my work for Architectural Digest and local papers. I know people, I said. People who write stories, people who investigate corruption. If I give them everything, the recordings, the documents, the pattern of abuse going back 8 years, they'll run with it. That's a dangerous game, Mr. Chen. Once you go public, there's no taking it back. Victoria will know you're behind it. She'll use it against David in court. She's already using my grandchildren against David in court. She's already winning. I took a breath. The only way to stop someone like Victoria is to change the game entirely. Make it impossible for anyone to believe her. Paula was silent for so long I thought the connection had dropped. There's a journalist, she said finally. Catherine Chen, no relation. She works for the San Francisco Chronicle, investigative division. She's been looking into Marcus Webb for 2 years, ever since a friend of hers went through one of his divorces. She has pieces of the puzzle, but nothing solid enough to publish. And if I gave her the solid pieces, then she'd have enough for a front-page story, maybe a series. The kind of coverage that ends careers and starts criminal investigations. I felt something shift in my chest. Hope, maybe. Or just the relief of finally having a direction. Can you set up a meeting? I can do better than that. Catherine owes me a favor from a case I helped her with in 2019. If I call her tonight, she'll meet you tomorrow. Do it. Catherine Chen was nothing like I expected. I'd imagined a hard-bitten journalist, all sharp edges and cynicism. What I got was a woman in her late 30s with tired eyes and a gentle voice, who met me at a coffee shop in San Jose and ordered chamomile tea like we were old friends catching up. Paula called me "You have evidence," she said, stirring honey into her cup. She said it's the kind of evidence I've been looking for years. She's right. I slid the USB drive across the table. Recordings of Marcus Webb coaching my granddaughter to accuse her father of abuse. Documents showing a pattern of similar cases going back to 2016. Financial records linking Webb to a man named Frank Holloway, who has been running this operation as a business. Catherine picked up the drive, turning it over in her fingers. How did you obtain this? Does it matter? It matters for my story. If this was obtained illegally, my editors won't touch it. I met her eyes. I'm not asking you to use the recordings in court. I'm asking you to investigate. Use them as a roadmap. Find the other victims. Talk to the women who withdrew their complaints in 2019. Build your own evidence through legitimate means. She studied me for a long moment. Paula said you're doing this to save your grandchildren.
I'm doing this to stop a woman who sees children as tools, who trained my granddaughter to destroy her own father, who has probably done the same thing to dozens of other families. And if I write this story, it will destroy your daughter-in-law, your son's wife, the mother of your grandchildren. She stopped being family the moment she started using my grandchildren as weapons. Catherine nodded slowly. Then she slipped the USB drive into her bag. I need 48 hours. I'll listen to the recordings, review the documents, and make some calls. If everything checks out, I'll bring it to my editors on Friday morning. Victoria's custody petition is moving fast. Every day that passes, Emma is being coached to remember things that never happened. Every day that passes, my son loses more ground. I understand the urgency. Catherine finished her tea and stood up. But I won't publish anything I can't verify. That's what separates journalism from gossip. And if you can verify it. She smiled for the first time, a small, fierce expression that made me understand why she'd been chasing this story for 2 years. Then Marcus Webb is going to have a very bad weekend. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I couldn't contact David. Any communication between us could be used as evidence of coordination in Victoria's custody case. I couldn't go near my grandchildren. The emergency protection order kept me at least 500 feet from them at all times. I couldn't even leave my house without wondering if someone was watching, documenting, building a case against the unstable grandfather Victoria had been describing to anyone who would listen. So I waited. I cleaned my house, organized my garage, sorted through boxes of Linda's things that I've been putting off for years, found old photographs of David as a boy, grinning at the camera with a fishing pole in his hands, found pictures of Ethan and Emma from last year's Christmas, before Victoria had banned me from their lives. I put those pictures on my refrigerator, reminded myself why I was doing this. On Thursday evening, Paula called. Catherine verified the recordings. Her audio expert confirmed they haven't been altered. She also tracked down 2 of the women from the 2019 complaints. Both are willing to go on record now that they know they're not alone. So she's running the story. Tomorrow morning, front page. She's calling it the divorce doctor, inside a Bay Area therapist's pattern of manufactured abuse. Webb's name, Frank Holloway's name, the whole operation exposed. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. What about Victoria? Catherine's focusing on Webb and Frank for now. She doesn't want to be accused of interfering with an ongoing custody case, but she mentions current clients who may have been affected. Anyone reading between the lines will understand. And David, he's been served with emergency custody paperwork. Hearing is scheduled for Monday. But once Catherine's story drops, David's lawyer can petition to have Emma's statements reevaluated in light of Webb's methods. I closed my eyes, feeling something that might have been relief. It's almost over. Almost, Paula agreed. But there's one more thing. Catherine wants to interview you. On camera. She wants the human element. A grandfather fighting to protect his family from a system designed to exploit them. When? Tomorrow afternoon, after the story goes live. She thinks your face will make the story resonate with readers. Make it personal instead of just another case of professional misconduct. I thought about what that would mean. My face on television, in newspapers, associated with accusations of child manipulation and fraud. Victoria would use it against me. Her lawyers would spin it as proof of my obsessive behavior. But my grandchildren would see it too. Maybe not now, but someday. They would see their grandfather standing up, fighting back, refusing to let them be used as pawns in someone else's game. Tell Catherine I'll do it. The story broke at 6 a.m. on Friday, March 29th. I was already awake, watching the Chronicle's website refresh every 30 seconds until the headline appeared. The divorce doctor, inside a Bay Area therapist's pattern of manufactured abuse. Psychologist Marcus Webb accused of coaching children to make false allegations against fathers in high-asset divorces. Investigation reveals 8-year operation involving consultant Frank Holloway. I read the article 3 times. Catherine had done exactly what she promised. Built a story from verified sources and documented evidence, never once mentioning how she learned where to look. The 2 women from 2019 were quoted extensively. 3 more victims had come forward after Catherine started making calls. And buried in paragraph 17, a single sentence that made my heart stop.
Sources indicate that Webb is currently treating at least 3 children whose parents are involved in active divorce proceedings. Child welfare authorities have been notified. By 8 a.m., the story had been picked up by local television stations. By noon, it was trending on social media. By 3 p.m., when I sat down for my interview with Catherine, Marcus Webb had released a statement denying all allegations and announcing that he was temporarily closing his practice to focus on clearing his name. Mr. Chen, Catherine said, adjusting her microphone, can you tell me what it felt like when you first realized what was happening to your granddaughter? I looked into the camera and thought about Emma. Her laugh, her drawings, the way she used to run to me when I came to visit, shouting, "Grandpa," like I was the most important person in the world. It felt like watching someone poison a well, I said, slowly, carefully, making sure no one noticed until the water was already toxic. My granddaughter is 5 years old. She trusts adults to protect her, to tell her the truth, and Marcus Webb used that trust to plant memories in her head that will affect her for the rest of her life. Your daughter-in-law enrolled Emma in therapy with Dr. Webb. Do you believe she knew what he was doing? I chose my words carefully. I believe that my daughter-in-law was working with Dr. Webb and her father to execute a plan that would have destroyed my son and separated him from his children forever. Whether she understood the full implications of what they were doing to Emma. I paused. That's something she'll have to answer for herself. The emergency custody petition filed against your son includes statements from Emma about alleged abuse. In light of Dr. Webb's methods, do you believe those statements are accurate? My son has never harmed his children. Never. The statements Emma made were the result of weeks of coaching by a man who has done this to at least 8 other families. My son is a victim, and so is Emma. Catherine nodded, making notes. What do you want people to take away from this story? I thought about the question. About all the fathers who had been destroyed by men like Webb. About all the children who had been used as weapons in wars they didn't understand. I want people to know that the system can be manipulated, I said. That there are professionals out there who will hurt children for money. And I want anyone who's going through something similar to know that they're not alone. That there are people who will fight for them. That the truth can still win, even when everything seems hopeless. The camera stopped rolling. Catherine reached over and squeezed my hand. That was perfect, she said. This is going to change things, Mr. Chen. I can feel it. I nodded, but I wasn't thinking about the interview anymore. I was thinking about Victoria. She would have seen the story by now, watched her father's name dragged through the mud, realized that the carefully constructed plan was falling apart around her, which meant she was about to do something desperate, and I needed to be ready. The call came at 9:17 that night, not from David, not from Paula, from Victoria. You think you've won, she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. You think exposing Marcus means anything? The custody petition is already filed. The statements are already on record. By the time anyone investigates, I'll have full custody and your son will be a registered sex offender. Victoria, you should have stayed in your lane, Robert. You should have accepted your role as the helpful grandfather who writes checks and shuts up. But you couldn't do that, could you? You had to play detective. You had to be the hero. I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to protect my grandchildren. Your grandchildren. She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Those children belong to me. They came from my body. I decide what's best for them. And what's best for them is a life without their father, or their grandfather confusing them with their outdated ideas about family. You're going to lose, Victoria. The story is out. People know what you did. The story is about Marcus, not me. And by the time anyone connects the dots, I'll be long gone. Me, the kids, and every dollar I can extract from David on my way out the door. Where are you going? Silence. Victoria, where are my grandchildren? Somewhere you'll never find them. Her voice dropped to something cold and final. Goodbye, Robert. Give my regards to your son. Tell him I said thank you for the memories. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, feeling the floor drop out from under me. She was running, taking the kids and disappearing before anyone could stop her. And I had no idea where. I called David immediately. She's gone, I said. Victoria called me. She's taking the kids and running. Running where? I don't know, but we need to find them, now. Dad, I can't just. He stopped himself. You're right. What do we do? I thought about Paula, about Danny, about all the resources we'd assembled over the past months. We have people. We have surveillance footage, financial records, travel patterns. If Victoria's planning to run, she's been planning it for a while. There will be a trail. How long? I don't know. Hours. Maybe. Maybe less. Then we better start looking. I hung up and called Paula. Victoria's running. She's taking the kids. I heard. Danny's already on it. He's pulling footage from the airport, the Amtrak station, rental car agencies. If she's trying to leave the Bay Area, we'll find her. And if she's already gone, Paula was quiet for a moment. Then we'll find her anyway. It just might take longer. I thought about Emma and Ethan, scared, confused, being dragged away from everything they knew, by a mother who saw them as nothing more than leverage. Find them, I said, whatever it takes. The next 6 hours felt like 6 years. Paula had mobilized everyone. Danny watching the airports, a contact at the DMV running Victoria's license plate through the system, a former colleague at the FBI making quiet inquiries about passport activity. We had eyes everywhere, but Victoria had planned this well. Too well. At 3:47 a.m., Danny called with the first break. Got her. Security footage from a gas station in Vacaville. She stopped for fuel at 10:23 p.m., about an hour after she called you. Which direction? North on I-80. She's heading towards Sacramento, maybe beyond. I pulled up a map on my phone, tracing the route with my finger. North meant Oregon, Washington, maybe Canada. Places where she could disappear, start over, create a new identity for herself and my grandchildren. Can you follow her trail? I'm working on it. California has traffic cameras on most major highways. If she stayed on I-80, I can track her through Sacramento, Reno, maybe into Nevada. Do it. Call me the second you find anything. I hung up and looked at David. He'd been sitting at my kitchen table since midnight, alternating between desperate hope and crushing despair. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold hours ago. Vacaville, I said. She's heading north. North where? That's what Danny's figuring out. David stood up abruptly, pacing the length of my kitchen like a caged animal. I should be out there, driving, looking, doing something. You'd be driving blind. Victoria could be anywhere in 3 states by now. We need to be smart about this. Smart. He laughed bitterly. I've been smart for months. Pretending everything was fine, gathering evidence, playing her game. And where did it get me? My children are gone, Dad. My wife is running with my kids, and I'm sitting in your kitchen waiting for phone calls. I walked over and put my hands on his shoulders. David, look at me. He met my eyes. I saw the boy I'd raised in there, somewhere behind the fear and the anger. The kid who'd crashed my truck and expected me to yell. But I just hugged him and told him I was glad he was okay. We're going to find them. Victoria is smart, but she's also desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. And when she makes hers, we'll be ready. What if we're too late? We won't be. I won't let that happen. My phone buzzed. Paula's number. Tell me something good. Victoria's car crossed into Oregon at 4:12 a.m. She's on I-5 now, heading toward Portland. Portland. Where Marcus Webb was born. Where Frank Holloway had connections from his real estate days. She's going to ground. Somewhere she knows. Somewhere she has support. That's what I'm thinking. I've got Danny cross-referencing Frank's old business records with property listings in the Portland area. If they own anything up there, we'll find it. How long? An hour, maybe 2. These records aren't exactly organized. I looked at the clock on my wall. 4:23 a.m. If Victoria was already past the Oregon border, she had a 3-hour head start. Even if we left right now, we'd be hours behind. Keep looking, I said. Call me the second you have an address. The address came at 6:17 a.m., a cabin in Clackamas County, about 40 minutes southeast of Portland. Frank Holloway had purchased it in 2012 under a shell company, the same kind of anonymous structure he used for everything else. It had been sitting empty for years, maintained by a local property management company that asked no questions. The perfect place to disappear. David and I were in my truck before Paula finished giving us the GPS coordinates. We took turns driving, pushing the speed limit as much as we dared, watching the landscape change from California brown to Oregon green as the hours ticked by. Somewhere ahead of us, my grandchildren were with a woman who had tried to destroy their father.
A woman who saw them as assets, not children. A woman who would do anything to win. I drove faster. We crossed into Oregon at 10:43 a.m. Paula called with updates every 30 minutes. Victoria's car had been spotted at a rest stop near Salem at 6:15 a.m. A traffic camera caught her on Highway 26 at 7:42 a.m. After that, the trail went cold. Clackamas County had fewer cameras, more back roads, more places to disappear. But we had the address. And we had 6 hours of rage and determination fueling every mile. The cabin appeared on my GPS at 12:17 p.m.
A dot on a map surrounded by forest, accessible only by a single dirt road that wound through the trees like a snake. I pulled over a quarter-mile from the turnoff. "What are we doing?" David asked. "Thinking." I studied the map on my phone. "If we drive straight up to the cabin, Victoria will hear us coming. She might run again. Or worse, she might do something desperate. So what's the alternative? We approach on foot, quietly. See what we're dealing with before we make a move." David nodded, his jaw tight. And then we get my grandchildren back. The forest was dense and silent. We moved through the trees like ghosts, stepping over fallen branches, ducking under low-hanging limbs. The cabin came into view after about 15 minutes, a small wooden structure with a wraparound porch, smoke curling from the chimney. Victoria's car was parked in front, and next to it, another vehicle, a black BMW with California plates. Frank Holloway was here. Of course, David muttered. Her father. He probably helped her plan the whole thing, which means we're dealing with 2 adults, not 1. I studied the cabin, looking for entry points, escape routes, anything that might give us an advantage. Windows on all 4 sides, 1 door visible, probably a back door too. We can't just knock on the front door. No, but we can watch. Wait for an opportunity. We found a position behind a fallen log, about 50 yards from the cabin, with a clear view of the front porch. I pulled out my phone and texted Paula our location. At the cabin, Victoria and Frank both here, kids presumably inside, waiting for opportunity. Her response came immediately. Police notified. ETA 45 minutes. Do not engage until backup arrives. 45 minutes. 3/4 of an hour. Watching the cabin where my grandchildren were being held by people who saw them as nothing more than pawns. I could wait. I had to wait. 23 minutes later, the front door opened. Emma walked onto the porch. My granddaughter, 5 years old, dark hair and messy pigtails, wearing a jacket I didn't recognize, stood at the railing and looked out at the forest. She seemed smaller than I remembered. Fragile. Lost. I started to stand up, and David grabbed my arm. "Dad, no. That's Emma. She's right there." "I know, but if you run out there now, Victoria will grab her and disappear into the cabin. We need to wait for the police." I knew he was right. Every rational part of my brain understood the logic. But every other part, the part that had held Emma as a newborn, that had taught her to paint, that had made her chocolate chip pancakes every Saturday morning, that part wanted to sprint across the clearing and gather her in my arms. I forced myself to stay down. Emma stood on the porch for another minute, then turned and went back inside. The door closed behind her. David exhaled slowly. She looked okay. She didn't look scared. She doesn't know she should be scared. To her, this is probably an adventure. A trip to a cabin in the woods with Mommy and Grandpa Frank. God. David ran his hands through his hair. What has Victoria been telling them? What lies has she been feeding them about me? It doesn't matter. Once we get them back, we'll have time to undo the damage. But first, we have to get them back. My phone buzzed. Paula again. Police 15 minutes out. Stay hidden. 15 minutes. I could wait 15 minutes. The police arrived in unmarked cars. 2 vehicles, 4 officers, led by a detective named Sarah Okonkwo, who had been briefed by Paula during the drive. She found our position behind the fallen log and crouched beside us, speaking in a low voice. "We have units at the back of the property. Escape routes are blocked. When we approach, I need you both to stay here. Do you understand?" "Those are my children in there," David said. "I understand that, sir. And I promise you, we will get them out safely. But I need you to let us do our jobs." David looked at me. I saw the struggle in his eyes, the desperate need to act, versus the knowledge that acting rashly could make everything worse. "We'll stay here," I said. "Just, please, Be careful. They're 5 and 6 years old. Detective Okonkwo nodded. We'll bring them out. I give you my word. She moved toward the cabin with 3 officers in formation behind her. The 4th stayed with us, partly for our protection, partly to make sure we didn't do anything stupid. We watched as they approached the front door. Detective Okonkwo knocked. Police, open the door. Silence. Another knock. Victoria Chen, Frank Holloway. This is the Clackamas County Sheriff's Department. We have a warrant for the detention of minor children Ethan and Emma Chen. Open the door immediately. More silence. Then, muffled voices from inside, arguing. Victoria's sharp tone. Frank's lower rumble. The door opened a crack. Victoria's face appeared. Pale, drawn, her eyes darting between the officers. There must be some mistake. We're just on vacation. A family trip. Ma'am, we have orders from California Family Court regarding the children. I need you to step outside and let us verify their safety. They're fine. They're perfectly fine. This is harassment. Ma'am, you can't just take my children. I'm their mother. I have custody. Detective Okonkwo's voice remained calm. The custody order has been suspended pending investigation. I need you to step outside. Now. Victoria's eyes swept the clearing and found me. For one long moment, we stared at each other across 50 yards of Oregon forest. I saw recognition in her face, then rage, then something that might have been fear. You, she hissed. You did this. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time. The door slammed shut. The next few minutes happened in a blur. Officers moving toward the back of the cabin, radio chatter about subjects refusing to comply. Detective Okonkwo calling for Victoria and Frank to come out peacefully. Then, a child's scream. Emma. David was on his feet before I could stop him. He sprinted toward the cabin, crossing the clearing in seconds, his voice breaking as he shouted his daughter's name. Emma, Emma, it's Daddy. I'm here. I ran after him, my knees protesting, my heart pounding. The officer assigned to watch us was shouting something, but I couldn't hear him over the blood rushing in my ears. We reached the porch just as the back door burst open. Officers flooded into the cabin. More shouting. Frank Holloway's voice, raised in protest. Victoria screaming something about lawyers and rights and conspiracy. And then, silence. Detective Okonkwo appeared in the doorway, a child in each arm. Ethan on the left, Emma on the right, both crying. Both reaching for their father. Daddy. David gathered them up like they might disappear if he let go. Emma buried her face in his chest. Ethan wrapped his arms around his father's neck and held on with the desperate strength of a child who'd been terrified. I stood on the porch, watching my son hold his children, feeling tears stream down my face that I didn't bother to wipe away. It was over. After everything, the investigation, the evidence, the story, the flight, it was finally over. They brought Victoria and Frank out in handcuffs. Frank went quietly, his face a mask of defeated dignity. He'd been running schemes like this for 8 years, and he knew when the game was up. Victoria was different. She fought every step, twisting against the officer's grip, screaming accusations at David, at me, at anyone who would listen. This is kidnapping. You're taking my children. Robert Chen orchestrated this whole thing. He broke into my apartment. He stole my documents. He's been stalking me for months. Detective Okonkwo guided her toward the patrol car. Ma'am, you'll have a chance to make a statement at the station. I don't want to make a statement. I want my children. David, tell them. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. David looked at his wife, the woman he'd married, the mother of his children, the person who had tried to destroy his life with manufactured accusations of abuse. Goodbye, Victoria, he said quietly. She stared at him, mouth open, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then the car door closed, and she was gone. We spent the rest of the day at the Clackamas County Sheriff's Station. The children were examined by a social worker and a child psychologist. Not Marcus Webb, thank God, but someone who actually cared about their well-being. Emma was confused, scared, and kept asking when they were going back to the cabin. Ethan was quieter, more watchful, already understanding at 6 years old that something terrible had almost happened. David stayed with them the entire time. I watched from the waiting room, drinking vending machine coffee and feeling every one of my 62 years. Paula called at 5:47 p.m. It's done, she said. Frank Holloway is being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, child endangerment,
and a dozen other things I can't even pronounce. Victoria is facing similar charges, plus custodial interference and false imprisonment of a minor. What about Marcus Webb? That's the best part. After Catherine's story broke, 3 more families came forward.
The California Board of Psychology revoked his license this afternoon. He's facing criminal charges in 4 counties. I close my eyes, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. And the custody case. Dismissed. The judge reviewed the evidence this morning, the recordings, the documents, the testimony from the other victims. Emma's statements have been invalidated. David has full custody, pending a final hearing next month. Full custody.
The words echoed in my head like a benediction. Thank you, Paula, for everything. Don't thank me yet. We still have to get everyone home. And there's going to be a lot of healing to do. Those kids went through something traumatic.
It's going to take time. I know. But at least now we have time. I hung up and walked to the window, looking out at the Oregon sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful. Peaceful.
Nothing like the chaos of the past 24 hours. Behind me, I heard a door open. Small footsteps crossing the floor. Grandpa. I turned. Emma was standing in the doorway, her dark hair falling out of its pigtails, her eyes red from crying.
She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then she ran across the room and threw herself into my arms. Grandpa, I missed you. Mommy said you went away, but I didn't believe her. I knew you would come back. I held her tight, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling her small heart beating against my chest.
I'll always come back for you, sweetheart.
Always.
Over her shoulder, I saw David watching us from the doorway, Ethan in his arms. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of everything we'd been through, everything we'd sacrificed, everything we'd won. We had a long road ahead, healing,
rebuilding, helping the children understand what had happened without destroying their ability to trust. But we would walk that road together, as a family.
3 weeks after Oregon, I stood in a California courtroom and watched justice unfold.
The Alameda County Courthouse was a cold, institutional building. All marble floors and fluorescent lights, and the echoing footsteps of people whose lives were being decided by strangers in black robes. I've been in courtrooms before, for business disputes and contract negotiations, but never for anything like this. Never to watch someone I'd once called family answer for their crimes. Victoria was brought in at 9:17 a.m., wearing an orange jumpsuit that made her look smaller than I remembered. Her hair, always so perfectly styled, hung limp around her face. Her nails, always manicured, were bitten to the quick. She looked broken. I wished I could feel sorry for her. Part of me wanted to, the part that remembered her smile at the wedding, her tears when Ethan was born, the way she'd held Linda's hand during those final weeks in hospice. But then I thought about the recordings, about Emma's voice, confused and trusting, being coached to destroy her own father. The sympathy died before it could take root.
Frank Holloway sat at the defense table beside her, wearing a suit that had probably cost more than my first car. His lawyer, a silver-haired man named Preston Wells who specialized in white-collar criminals, was whispering something in his ear. The charges were read aloud by the clerk. Conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, child endangerment, custodial interference, false imprisonment, coaching false testimony from a minor. The list went on for nearly 3 minutes, each count landing like a hammer blow in the silent courtroom. Victoria pleaded not guilty. Of course she did. Frank pleaded not guilty too, with the practiced calm of someone who'd been in similar situations before and always found a way out. But this time was different. This time, there were recordings, documents, a pattern of victims stretching back 8 years. This time, Catherine Chen's story had been picked up by national media, and the public was watching. This time, there was nowhere to hide. The trial was scheduled for September. Until then, Victoria remained in custody. The judge had denied bail, citing her flight to Oregon as evidence of being a risk. Frank made bail at $750,000, posted by a mysterious benefactor that Paula was still trying to identify. He was ordered to surrender his passport and wear an ankle monitor, but otherwise was free to return to his rental apartment in Phoenix. I didn't like it. A man like Frank Holloway, with his connections and his experience evading consequences, was dangerous even under surveillance. But there was nothing I could do about it, so I focused on what I could control. The children. Emma and Ethan came to live with David in a new apartment in San Jose, far from the Pleasanton house with its memories of Victoria's fake smiles and whispered manipulations. The place was small, a two-bedroom on the third floor of a complex near David's office, but the kids didn't seem to mind. They were just happy to be with their father. The first few weeks were hard. Emma had nightmares, not about the cabin, but about Dr. Marcus and his remembering games. She would wake up crying, confused about what was real and what she'd been told to imagine. David held her through those nights, patient and steady, never pushing her to talk, but always there when she needed him. Ethan was different. He didn't cry, didn't have nightmares, didn't show any obvious signs of trauma. But I noticed things. The way he watched doors, always tracking who was coming and going. The way he flinched at loud noises. The way he positioned himself between Emma and any adult he didn't recognize. 6 years old, and he'd already learned to be a protector. They started therapy, real therapy, with a child psychologist named Dr. Amanda Torres, who specialized in kids who'd been through family trauma. David had vetted her carefully, checking references and reading every paper she'd ever published, making sure she was nothing like Marcus Webb. She wasn't. Dr. Torres was warm, patient, and completely focused on the children's well-being, rather than anyone's legal strategy. Progress was slow, but it was real. I visited every weekend. Saturday mornings, I would drive to San Jose with groceries and toys and books, things I remembered the kids loving, things to remind them that their grandfather was still here, still constant, still the same person who'd made them pancakes and built birdhouses and taught them to fish. The first Saturday, Emma wouldn't look at me. I sat on David's couch while she played with her dolls in the corner, studiously ignoring my presence. David apologized, embarrassed, but I waved him off. She's processing, give her time. Time. It was the one thing I had plenty of now. No business to run, no wife to care for, no purpose except being present for the family I'd fought so hard to protect. The second Saturday, Emma asked me to pass her a crayon. I did, without making a big deal of it. She went back to drawing. The third Saturday, she showed me what she was drawing. A house with a big yard and a swimming pool, like the ones I used to build. This is where we're going to live someday, she said. Daddy promised. I looked at David. He shrugged, smiling. I might have mentioned that Grandpa used to build pools, and that maybe, someday, he could build us one. I'd like that, I said, feeling something warm spread through my chest. I'd like that very much. The fourth Saturday, Emma climbed into my lap while I was reading the newspaper and fell asleep against my shoulder. She didn't wake up for 2 hours. Progress, slow, but real. The custody hearing was on April 28th. David's lawyer, Sandra Morrison, had prepared a mountain of evidence. The recordings, the documents, the testimony from Dr. Torres about the children's progress, statements from teachers and neighbors about David's character. But the real star of the hearing was Catherine Chen's investigation, now expanded to a 4-part series that had run in the Chronicle and been syndicated to papers across the country. The judge reviewed everything for 3 hours. Then she issued her ruling. Full custody to David, with no visitation rights for Victoria, pending the outcome of her criminal trial. The children were not to have any contact with Frank or Diane Holloway. And most importantly, all of Emma's statements to the school counselor were formally stricken from the record, declared the product of coaching by a discredited therapist. When the judge finished, David put his head in his hands and cried. I sat beside him, my hand on his shoulder, and led him. Afterward, outside the courthouse, a reporter approached us. I recognized her, one of Catherine's colleagues, probably looking for a follow-up story. Mr. Chen, how do you feel about the judge's ruling? David wiped his eyes and looked at the camera. I feel grateful. Grateful to my father, who never stopped fighting for us. Grateful to the investigators and journalists who exposed the truth. And grateful to my children, who are stronger and braver than they should ever have had to be. Do you have any message for your wife? David's face hardened. She's not my wife anymore. The divorce papers were filed last week. He paused. My message to Victoria is simple. I hope you get the help you need, and I hope you never see our children again. We walked away from the cameras, toward the parking lot, toward the rest of our lives. The letter arrived on May 3rd. I found it in my mailbox, tucked between a utility bill and a catalog I hadn't ordered. Plain white envelope, no return address, my name written in handwriting I didn't immediately recognize. I opened it at my kitchen table with my morning coffee. Dear Robert, I know you have every reason to throw this letter away unread, but I'm asking you, begging you, to hear me out. Everything they're saying about me is wrong. I never wanted to hurt David. I never wanted to hurt the children. I was trapped in something I didn't understand, manipulated by my father and by Marcus into doing things I knew were wrong, but couldn't stop. I'm not a monster. I'm a victim, just like everyone else. I know you don't believe me. I know David doesn't believe me, but the children might, someday, and I need you to tell them the truth, that their mother loved them, that everything I did was for them, that I never meant for any of this to happen. Please, Robert, you're the only one who might understand. Your wife died, and you know what it's like to be alone, to be desperate, to do things you regret. I'm asking you to find some compassion in your heart for a woman who made terrible mistakes, but isn't beyond redemption. I'm willing to testify against my father. I'm willing to tell the whole truth about Marcus and the operation. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. But I need your help. I need you to talk to the prosecutor. Tell them I'm cooperating. Tell them I deserve a second chance. Please. For the children. Victoria. I read the letter twice. Then I set it down and stared out my kitchen window at the hills I'd watched every morning for 30 years. A victim. That's what she was calling herself now. Trapped by her father. Manipulated by Marcus, an innocent woman caught up in something beyond her control. I thought about the exit strategy document I'd found in her apartment, the meticulous timeline, the calculations about how much money she could extract from David, the notation, in her handwriting, that said, Phase 3, Therapy, enroll E in sessions with MW. She had enrolled her own daughter in sessions with a man she knew would coach false memories of abuse. That wasn't the action of a victim. That was the action of a predator. I called Paula that afternoon. Victoria sent me a letter. She wants me to advocate for her with the prosecutor. Says she's willing to testify against Frank. Paula was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? I want to burn the letter and forget it ever existed. But, I sighed. But if she testifies against Frank, it might strengthen the case. Guarantee that he can't wriggle out of this like he's done before. That's true. Frank's lawyer is already floating theories about how Victoria acted alone. How Frank was just a concerned father trying to help his daughter. How he had no idea what Marcus Webb was really doing. So her testimony could be valuable. It could. But Robert, you don't owe her anything. You don't owe her advocacy or compassion or a second chance. Whatever deal she makes with the prosecutor, she can make on her own. I thought about Emma, asleep on my shoulder. About Ethan, positioning himself to protect his sister. About the healing they still had to do, the years of therapy ahead of them, the scars that might never fully fade. I'm not going to help her, I said. She made her choices. She can live with the consequences. Good. Paula's voice softened. For what it's worth, I think that's the right decision. I know. I just wish it didn't feel so much like closing a door forever. Some doors need to be closed, Robert. That's how you keep the people you love safe. I burned the letter that evening, watched the paper curl and blacken in my fireplace, the words disappearing into ash. Victoria's plea for compassion, her self-serving excuses, her manipulation dressed up as remorse, all of it gone in seconds. But I couldn't stop thinking about one thing she'd written. I need you to tell them the truth, that their mother loved them. Did she? Did Victoria love Emma and Ethan, somewhere beneath the calculations and the schemes? Or had they always been means to an end, assets to be leveraged rather than children to be cherished? I didn't know. I would probably never know. What I did know was this. Whatever love Victoria felt for her children, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to stop her from using them as weapons. It wasn't enough to protect them from Marcus Webb's remembering games. It wasn't enough to choose their well-being over her own financial interests. Love without action wasn't love. It was just another form of manipulation. 2 weeks later, Frank Holloway cut off his ankle monitor and disappeared. Paula called me at 6:15 in the morning with the news. He was gone for 3 hours before anyone noticed. His apartment in Phoenix was cleaned out. Cash, documents, everything. He had a go bag ready. Where is he now? We don't know. Mexico, maybe. He has connections in Tijuana from his real estate days. Or he could be anywhere. The man's been running schemes for decades. He probably has escape routes we haven't even thought of. I sat on the edge of my bed, feeling the old fear creeping back.
Is he a threat to the children? Honestly,
I don't think so. Frank's survival instinct is strong. He knows that going anywhere near David or the kids would bring every law enforcement agency in the country down on his head.
he's running to save himself, not to cause more trouble.
But you can't be sure.
No, I can't be sure of anything.
Paula paused. I'm arranging additional security for David's apartment, just as a precaution.
Good, thank you. I hung up and walked to my window. Somewhere out there, Frank Holloway was free. The man who had orchestrated 8 years of destroyed families, ruined lives, traumatized children. He was breathing clean air, eating good food, living his life without consequence. It wasn't fair. But then, fairness had never been the point. The point was protecting my grandchildren. And they were safe, with their father, surrounded by people who loved them. Frank could run to the ends of the earth. It wouldn't change what he'd done. It wouldn't undo the evidence Catherine had published. It wouldn't bring back the years he'd stolen from his victims. And someday, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but someday, justice would catch up with him. I had to believe that. Victoria's trial began on September 12th. Without Frank to take the fall alongside her, Victoria's defense strategy shifted. Now she was the sole victim, manipulated by her father, coerced by Marcus Webb, trapped in a web of deception she couldn't escape. Her lawyer, a public defender named Maria Gonzalez, painted a picture of a vulnerable woman from a dysfunctional family, groomed from childhood to see relationships as transactions, never taught that love could exist without conditions. It was effective, in a way. Some of the jurors seemed moved by Victoria's tears on the witness stand, her trembling voice as she described her father's expectations and Marcus Webb's pressure tactics. But then the prosecution played the recordings. Emma's voice, innocent and trusting. Webb's questions, leading and insidious. And the sound of Victoria in the background, coaching her daughter on what to say. Remember, sweetie, Daddy does things that make you feel funny. You just need to remember. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was 3 weeks later. The judge, an older woman named Patricia Yamamoto, who had presided over family law cases for 23 years, looked at Victoria with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sadness, maybe. Or just exhaustion. Ms.
Chen, this court has rarely seen a case of such deliberate cruelty. You weaponized your own children against their father. You hired a professional to implant false memories of abuse in your daughter's mind. You participated in a scheme that has destroyed families across this state. Victoria's face was pale, but she didn't cry. Your lawyer has argued that you were a victim of your father's manipulation. And perhaps that's true, to some extent. But you are an adult. You made choices. And those choices caused profound harm to innocent people, including the 2 children who trusted you to protect them. Judge Yamamoto shuffled her papers. The prosecution has requested the maximum sentence. The defense has requested leniency, based on your cooperation and lack of prior criminal history. A pause. This court sentences you to 14 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 10.
Additionally, you are permanently stripped of all parental rights to Ethan and Emma Chen.
Victoria finally broke. The sound that came from her was barely human, a keening wail that echoed through the courtroom. I watched her collapse against her lawyer, watched the bailiffs move in to escort her out, watched the door close behind her for the last time. It was over. It was finally over. 6 months after Victoria's sentencing, I watched my grandson blow out 7 candles on a birthday cake I'd made myself. Ethan's party was small, just David, Emma, Dr. Torres, and me gathered around the kitchen table in the new house. The house I'd helped David buy, using some of the money from selling my business. For bedrooms, a big backyard, and a swimming pool that I'd spent the summer building with my own hands. My last pool, my best pool, built for the people who mattered most. Make a wish, Emma shouted, bouncing in her seat. At 5.5, she'd recovered faster than any of us expected. Dr. Torres said children were resilient, that they could heal from almost anything if they felt safe and loved. Emma felt both. Ethan closed his eyes, his face scrunched in concentration. I wondered what he was wishing for. A new bike, maybe. Or a puppy. He'd been dropping hints about puppies for weeks. Or maybe something deeper. Something only a 7-year-old who'd been through what he'd been through could understand. He blew out the candles in one breath. What did you wish for? Emma demanded. can't tell you. It won't come true. That's not fair. That's the rules. David caught my eye across the table and smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from him in months. Not the tired, forced expression he wore when he was pretending everything was fine, but something genuine, something hopeful. We were going to be okay. All of us. The new house was in Los Gatos, far enough from Pleasanton that the kids wouldn't run into old classmates or neighbors who remembered their mother. David had found a job at a medical device company in San Jose. Different company, similar role, but with a boss who understood when he needed to leave early for therapy appointments or school plays. I visited every weekend, just like before. But now my visits weren't just about being present. They were about building. Saturday mornings, Ethan and I worked on projects in the garage. He was too young for power tools, but I taught him to measure and sand and paint. The same skills my father had taught me 50 years ago. We built birdhouses and shelves, and a wooden sword that Emma immediately claimed for herself. Saturday afternoons, Emma and I painted. She'd moved beyond stick figures now, experimenting with colors and shapes and abstract patterns that reminded me of Linda's watercolors. I bought her a proper easel for her 6th birthday, and she spent hours in front of it, humming to herself while the afternoon light streamed through the windows. Saturday evenings, we all ate dinner together. David cooked. He'd gotten surprisingly good at it, working through a cookbook Linda had given him years ago that he'd never opened. Pasta and chicken and vegetables, simple food that filled the house with warmth and the sound of conversation. Normal things, family things, the kind of moments I'd thought were lost forever. Dr. Torres discharged Emma from therapy in January. She's made remarkable progress, the psychologist told us during the final session. The false memories have been successfully deconstructed. She understands that the things Dr. Webb told her to remember weren't real. And more importantly, she's rebuilt her trust in the adults around her. What about long-term effects? David asked. Will she remember any of this when she's older? She'll remember that something difficult happened when she was young. But children's memories are malleable. That's what made her vulnerable to Webb's techniques, but it's also what allowed her to heal. By the time she's a teenager, this will feel like a distant dream, something that happened to a different person. Emma was playing with blocks in the corner of Dr. Torres's office, building a tower that kept falling down. Every time it collapsed, she laughed and started over. She's going to be fine, Dr. Torres said softly. You all are. Ethan took longer. His wounds were different, less about implanted memories and more about the weight of understanding. He'd been 6 when his mother fled with him to Oregon, old enough to know something was wrong. Old enough to remember the fear in Victoria's voice, the anger in Frank's, the confusion of being pulled from his life and driven through the night to a cabin in the woods. Old enough to understand, on some level, that his mother had chosen her schemes over her children. He didn't talk about it much. When David or I tried to bring up the past, he'd shrug and change the subject, retreating into video games or books, or the careful silence of a child who'd learned not to ask too many questions. But slowly, inch by inch, he began to open up. The breakthrough came on a Saturday in February. We were in the garage, sanding a bookshelf we'd been working on for weeks, when Ethan suddenly stopped and looked at me. Grandpa, can I ask you something? Anything, buddy. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Did Mom ever love us? Like, really love us? I set down my sandpaper and turned to face him fully. Why do you ask? Because. He bit his lip. Because sometimes I think maybe she did. Like when she used to read me stories at night, or when she'd make pancakes on Sundays, or when she'd hug me after I had a bad dream. That felt real. That felt like love. It might have been real, I said carefully. People can love someone and still hurt them. It doesn't make the hurt okay, but it doesn't mean the love was fake. But then why did she do those things? Why did she try to take us away from Dad? Why did she make Emma say those lies? I looked at my grandson, 7 years old, carrying questions that grown adults struggled to answer. I don't know, Ethan. I wish I did. But here's what I do know. I put my hand on his shoulder. Your mother made bad choices, terrible choices, and she's paying for them now. But those choices don't change who you are. They don't define your future. And they don't mean you can't have a good life, with people who love you and would never hurt you. Like you and Dad, like me and Dad, and your sister, and Dr. Torres. And everyone else who's been helping you through this. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Okay, Grandpa. He picked up his sandpaper and went back to work.
I watched him for a moment, his small hands moving carefully over the wood, his face focused and determined, and felt something loosen in my chest. A knot I hadn't even known was there. He was going to be okay. It might take time. It might take years. But my grandson was going to grow up strong and kind and whole, despite everything his mother had tried to do to him. That was enough. That was everything. In March, David started dating again. Her name was Jennifer. She was a pediatric nurse at Stanford Children's Hospital, divorced with no kids, warm and funny and nothing like Victoria. They'd met at a charity event that David's company had sponsored, something about medical equipment for underserved communities, and hit it off immediately. David was nervous about introducing her to the kids. What if they're not ready? What if they think I'm trying to replace their mother? Their mother is in prison. I reminded him gently. They're not going to forget that. But they also deserve to see their father happy. They deserve to know that love doesn't always end in betrayal. The first meeting was awkward, the way first meetings always are. Emma was shy, hiding behind David's legs. Ethan was watchful, assessing this new person with the careful eyes of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. But Jennifer was patient. She didn't push, didn't try too hard, just sat on the floor and asked Emma about her paintings and listened to Ethan explain his latest video game. By the end of the afternoon, Emma was showing her the easel I'd bought, and Ethan was teaching her how to defeat the final boss of his favorite game. Progress, slow, but real. I found my own kind of peace that spring. The pool in David's backyard was finished in April. A beautiful thing. Kidney-shaped with a waterfall feature and a shallow end for the kids to splash in. I stood at the edge on the day we filled it, watching the water rise inch by inch, thinking about all the pools I'd built over 34 years. This one was different. Every pool I'd ever constructed had been for clients. Rich people in big houses who wanted something beautiful to look at. Something to impress their friends, something to show off at dinner parties. I'd taken pride in my work, but it had always been transactional, a service rendered for a fee. This pool was for my family. Every tile I'd laid, every pipe I'd connected, every inch of that waterfall, I'd done it with love. With the knowledge that my grandchildren would swim here, grow here, make memories here. That someday, they bring their own children to this pool and tell them about the grandfather who'd built it for them. That was worth more than any paycheck. In May, Paula called with news about Frank Holloway. They found him, she said, in a hospital in Guadalajara. He had a heart attack 3 days ago. Didn't survive. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. He's dead. Confirmed this morning by Mexican authorities. He'd been living under a false name, working as a consultant for some local businessman. Probably running the same scams he perfected here. I didn't know what to feel. Relief, maybe. Or just emptiness. The man who had orchestrated so much suffering, who had trained his own daughter to be a predator, who had destroyed families across 3 states. He was gone. No trial, no prison, no justice beyond the heart attack that had caught up with him in a foreign hospital room. Does Victoria know? The prison is notifying her today. Paula paused. How do you feel? I thought about it. I feel like it should matter more than it does. He was the mastermind. The one who started all of this. But now that he's gone, I trailed off. It doesn't change anything, does it? The families he destroyed are still destroyed. The children he hurt are still hurt. Victoria's still in prison. Frank dying doesn't undo any of that. No, Paula agreed. It doesn't. But it does mean he can't hurt anyone else. That's something. Yeah, that's something. I thanked her and hung up. Then I walked to my window and looked out at the hills I'd watched every morning for 30 years. Frank Holloway was dead. The monster was gone. But the people he damaged would carry those scars forever. Including, in some ways, me. I'd spent nearly a year of my life fighting him, investigating his schemes, gathering evidence, protecting my family from his machinations. That fight had consumed me, given me purpose, kept me going through the darkest months since Linda died. Now it was over. And I had to figure out who I was without an enemy to fight. The answer came from an unexpected place. In June, Catherine Chen published a follow-up to her original investigation. This one focused on the victims, The families who had been destroyed by Marcus Webb and Frank Holloway over the past 8 years.
She interviewed ex-husbands who had lost their children to false accusations, mothers who had discovered too late what their divorce coaches were really doing, and children who had grown up believing lies about parents who had never hurt them. She also interviewed me. The article ran on a Sunday, with a photograph of me standing next to the pool I built for David. The headline read, "The Grandfather Who Fought Back." I expected hate mail, accusations of being a narcissist, a vigilante, someone who'd taken the law into his own hands. Instead, I got something else entirely. Letters, emails, phone calls, hundreds of them, from people across the country who had gone through similar experiences. Fathers who'd been falsely accused, grandparents who'd been cut off from their grandchildren, families who'd been torn apart by schemes just like Victoria's. They wanted to thank me. They wanted advice. They wanted to know how I'd done it, how I'd fought back and won when so many others had lost. I didn't have easy answers. Every situation was different. Every family had its own complications, its own challenges, its own impossible choices. But I could listen. I could share what I'd learned. I could connect people with Paula and Catherine and Sandra Morrison, and all the other professionals who'd helped me navigate the nightmare. I could be useful. By August, I'd helped 17 families. Some were in the early stages, just starting to suspect that something was wrong. Others were in the middle of custody battles, fighting accusations they couldn't prove were false. A few were at the end, picking up the pieces after losing everything. I didn't charge anyone, didn't want their money, didn't need it. What I wanted was to make sure that what had happened to David and my grandchildren didn't happen to anyone else. Paula called it my retirement project. David called it my crusade. Ethan, with the bluntness of a 7-year-old, called it Grandpa's superhero stuff. I just called it necessary. Because the system was broken. Because predators like Marcus Webb and Frank Holloway had exploited it for years without consequences. Because innocent people, innocent children, were being destroyed by schemes designed to look like protection. Someone had to fight back, and I had nothing left to lose. The first anniversary of Victoria's arrest fell on a Friday in late March. I didn't mark the occasion. Neither did David. We'd agreed, without ever discussing it explicitly, that our family's calendar would no longer be organized around Victoria's crimes. She'd taken enough from us already. We weren't going to give her the power to define our years. Instead, we celebrated something else. Ethan's first swim meet. He'd joined a junior league team in January, finally comfortable enough in the pool I'd built to want to compete. His specialty was the backstroke. Something about floating and looking at the sky appealed to him, he said. Less scary than putting your face in the water. The meet was held at a community center in Campbell, a small facility with bleachers that could hold maybe 100 parents and grandparents and siblings. David and Emma and I claimed seats in the front row, armed with a camera and a poster that Emma had painted that morning. "Go Ethan," it read, in letters big enough to see from space. When Ethan's heat was called, I felt my heart climb into my throat. He looked so small up on that starting block, his goggles too big for his face, his swim cap slightly crooked. 7 years old, standing in front of a crowd, about to race against kids he'd never met. The whistle blew. He dove in clean, his form better than I'd expected, his arms slicing through the water with the determination I'd seen so many times over the past year. He was smaller than some of the other kids, slower to turn at the wall, but he didn't stop, didn't hesitate, just kept swimming, stroke after stroke, until his hand touched the finish line. Third place, not first, not second, but third out of 8. A bronze ribbon that he clutched like it was made of actual gold. "Grandpa!" He ran to me after the race, dripping wet, grinning from ear to ear. Did you see me swim?" I gathered him in my arms, not caring about the water soaking through my shirt. "I saw you, buddy. I'm so proud of you. I came in third. You came in third. And you didn't give up. That's what matters." David was beside us now, Emma hanging off his arm, all of us crowded together in the chaos of a community swim meet. A family. Imperfect, scarred, but whole. I thought about Linda. About what she'd say if she could see us now. She'd probably cry. She always cried at the kids' events. Happy tears that embarrassed David when he was young, but that he'd grown to treasure after she was gone. Then she'd hug everyone. And she'd say something simple but true. "This is what matters. This, right here. Everything else is just noise. I looked at my son, my grandchildren, the pool where Ethan had just swum his first race. She was right. This was what mattered. This was everything. 2 years later, I stood in my backyard and watched the sun set over the hills of Walnut Creek. The same hills I'd watched every morning and evening since Linda and I bought this house in 1987. The same view that had witnessed our marriage, our son's childhood, our grandchildren's births, and the darkest chapter of my life. The hills hadn't changed, but I had. I was 64 years old now. My knees ached in the cold. My hair had gone from gray to white. The face in my mirror each morning looked more like my father than I'd ever expected, lined and weathered and marked by time in ways that couldn't be hidden. But I was still here, still standing, still surrounded by the people I loved. That was more than I dared to hope for, back when Victoria first closed the door in my face and told me I wasn't welcome in my grandchildren's lives. The kids were doing well. Ethan, now 9 years old, had become a serious swimmer. He'd moved up to the competitive league, training 3 times a week, dreaming of making the junior Olympic trials when he was 12. His backstroke had improved dramatically. His coach said he had natural talent, the kind that came along once in a generation. I watched every meet, sat in the front row with my camera and Emma's hand-painted signs, cheering until my voice gave out. Some things a grandfather doesn't miss, no matter how early the alarm has to be set. Emma was 7 now, a second grader with opinions about everything and a talent for art that reminded me more of Linda every day. She'd started taking classes at a studio in Los Gatos, working with real oils and canvases, creating paintings that visitors to our house sometimes mistook for adult work. She painted a portrait of Linda last spring, working from photographs I'd given her. My wife's face, captured in the brushstrokes of a granddaughter she'd never met, now hung in my living room where I could see it every morning. Emma said she'd wanted me to have it, so I wouldn't forget what Grandma looked like. As if I could ever forget. David married Jennifer in October. A small ceremony in the backyard of the Los Gatos house, with the pool I'd built sparkling in the autumn sunlight. Ethan was the ring bearer. Emma was the flower girl. I stood beside my son as his best man, trying not to cry and failing miserably. Jennifer was good for him, good for all of them. She'd become part of the family gradually, naturally, earning the children's trust through patience and kindness, rather than trying to replace what they'd lost. She didn't pretend to be their mother. She was something else, a bonus, she called it. An extra person to love them, support them, cheer for them at swim meets and art shows and school plays. The kids adored her. So did I. Victoria wrote to me once more, about a year after her sentencing. The letter arrived on a Thursday in November, forwarded from the prison where she was serving her 14-year sentence. I recognized the handwriting immediately. That careful, controlled script I'd seen on so many documents during my investigation. I almost threw it away unopened. But something stopped me. Curiosity, maybe. Or just the need for closure. Dear Robert, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to respond. But I needed to write it anyway. For myself if no one else. I've been in therapy. Real therapy, not the kind Marcus practiced. The prison has a program for women who've committed crimes against their families. I didn't want to participate at first. I told myself I didn't need it, that I was a victim, that everyone else was to blame. But the therapist asked me a question that I couldn't answer. She asked me to describe a moment when I put my children's needs before my own. Not their wants, their needs. A time when I sacrificed something for them without expecting anything in return. I couldn't think of one. Not one moment, in 6 years of being their mother, when I'd truly put them first. That's when I realized how broken I was. How completely my father had warped my understanding of what family meant. He taught me that love was transactional, that relationships were investments, that children were assets to be leveraged, not people to be cherished. I'm not blaming him. Not anymore. He's dead, and blaming dead men doesn't change anything. I made my own choices. I enrolled Emma in therapy with Marcus. I coached her to remember things that never happened. I tried to destroy David because I thought his destruction would set me free. I was wrong. About everything. I know I'll never see my children again. I know they're better off without me. What I did to them, what I almost did, is unforgivable. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I destroyed. I understand the magnitude of my betrayal, and I'm spending every day of this sentence trying to become someone who could never do those things again. Not because I think it will earn me redemption, but because I owe it to Emma and Ethan to be better, even if they never know.
You were right to fight for them. You were right to expose me. And I'm grateful, truly grateful, that they have you. Please take care of them, Robert. Please love them enough for both of us. Victoria. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in the box where I kept important documents, not because I planned to respond, but because it felt like something that should be preserved. Evidence of a monster trying to become human. Evidence that change, however late, was possible. I didn't write back. There was nothing I could say that would matter. But I thought about her sometimes, in the quiet moments. Wondered if her transformation was real or just another manipulation. Wondered if she'd ever truly understand the damage she'd caused. I hoped, for her sake, that she would. But I didn't lose sleep over it. I had my own life to live now. My own family to love. My own healing to continue. Victoria's journey was her own. The work continued. In the 2 years since Catherine's article had made me a symbol of resistance against predatory divorce schemes, I'd helped 43 families. Some I guided through investigations, connecting them with Paula and her network. Others I'd supported through custody battles, sharing what I'd learned about documentation and evidence, and the importance of staying calm when everything felt impossible. A few I'd simply listened to. Fathers crying on the phone at 2 a.m., terrified they were about to lose their children to false accusations. Grandparents cut off from grandkids by daughters-in-law or sons-in-law who saw them as obstacles. Children, grown children, some of them, trying to understand why their families had been torn apart. I didn't have all the answers. Nobody did. But I could offer something that mattered. The knowledge that they weren't alone. That someone else had walked this road and survived. That there was hope, even when hope felt impossible. Paula called me a survivor advocate. Catherine called me a family justice warrior. I called myself what I was, a grandfather who'd learned the hard way what family really meant, and who wanted to make sure others didn't have to learn the same lessons through the same pain. On the 2nd anniversary of Victoria's sentencing, I received an unexpected visitor. A woman named Maria Santos appeared at my front door on a Tuesday afternoon. Mid-30s, professional dress, nervous energy. She introduced herself as a researcher from Stanford's Department of Psychology, working on a study about family resilience in the aftermath of custody manipulation. She wanted to interview me. We're trying to understand what factors lead to successful recovery, she explained, sitting in my living room with a cup of the coffee I'd offered. Most families who go through what yours experienced never fully heal. The trauma is too severe, the trust too broken. But your family seems different. Your grandchildren are thriving. Your son has remarried. You've become an advocate for others in similar situations. We want to understand why. I thought about her question for a long time. I don't know if I can explain it, I said finally. It wasn't any one thing. It was a lot of things, building on each other. Such as, the truth, first of all. We got the truth out early. Exposed what Victoria was doing. Documented everything. Made sure the courts and the public knew what had really happened. That meant we didn't have to fight against false narratives. We could focus on healing instead of defending. What else? Professional help. Dr. Torres, the children's therapist, was incredible. She gave Emma and Ethan tools to process what had happened without being overwhelmed by it. And she gave David and me guidance on how to support them without making things worse. And beyond that, I looked at Linda's portrait on my wall, Emma's brushstrokes, capturing the warmth in my wife's eyes. Love, I said simply. We loved each other through it. Not perfect love. We made mistakes, had fights, said things we regretted. But we kept showing up, kept being present, kept reminding each other that we were in this together, and that together we were stronger than anything trying to tear us apart. Maria wrote in her notebook for a moment. Then she looked up. Mr. Chen, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting this journey? Someone who's just discovered that their family is being targeted by a scheme like the one you uncovered. I've been asked this question dozens of times over the past 2 years. The answer had evolved, refined itself, become something I could say with confidence. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Get professional help. Legal, psychological, investigative. Don't try to do it alone. And remember why you're fighting. Not for revenge. Not for vindication. For the people you love. That's what kept me going through the darkest moments. Every time I wanted to give up, I thought about Emma and Ethan, about the life they deserved, about the grandfather they needed me to be. I paused. When you fight for revenge, you become consumed by anger. When you fight for vindication, you become consumed by pride. But when you fight for love, for the people who depend on you, you find strength you didn't know you had. Because it's not about you anymore. It's about them. Maria finished writing and closed her notebook. Thank you, Mr. Chen. This has been incredibly valuable. One more thing, I said as she gathered her things to leave. Yes, tell the families in your study that it gets better. Not perfect. The scars don't disappear. The memories don't vanish. But the weight gets lighter. The pain becomes manageable. And eventually, you realize that the trauma didn't define you. What defined you was how you responded to it. She smiled. I'll tell them. A month after Maria's visit, I celebrated my 65th birthday. David threw a party in the Los Gatos backyard. Nothing elaborate, just family and close friends gathered around the pool, while the California sun set behind the hills. Jennifer made a cake. Ethan and Emma had coordinated a surprise that everyone knew about but pretended not to. Grandpa, close your eyes. I closed them, feeling hands guide me across the grass. Okay, now open. I opened my eyes. In front of me, illuminated by strings of lights that Emma had helped hang that morning, was a wooden bench, hand-carved, carefully assembled, with a brass plaque on the back that caught the fading light. For Grandpa Robert, who taught us that family is worth fighting for. Love, Ethan, and Emma. I stared at the bench, unable to speak. We made it ourselves, Ethan said proudly. Well, mostly. Dad helped with the hard parts, but I did all the sanding, and Emma painted the plaque. Do you like it? Emma asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. We wanted to make you something special, something you could keep forever. I knelt down and pulled them both into my arms. It's perfect, I said, my voice cracking. It's the most perfect gift I've ever received. They hugged me back, their small arms tight around my neck, their hearts beating against my chest. My grandchildren, my family, the people I'd fought for, sacrificed for, nearly destroyed myself to protect. They were worth it. They were worth everything. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the kids were asleep in their beds, I sat on my new bench and watched the stars appear over the hills. Linda would have loved this. The bench, the party, the grandchildren who were growing up strong and kind and whole. She would have cried happy tears and hugged everyone and told me she was proud of the man I'd become. I talked to her sometimes, in moments like this, not because I believed she could hear me, but because it helped to say the words out loud. We made it, sweetheart. Through everything Victoria threw at us, everything her father built, everything that tried to tear us apart, we made it. The stars twinkled, indifferent and eternal. I wish you were here. I wish you could see Ethan swim, see Emma paint, see David smiling again. But I think you'd be happy with how things turned out. I think you'd say we did okay. A breeze stirred the trees, carrying the scent of jasmine from somewhere down the street. I love you, Linda. I always will. And I promise, I'll keep taking care of them, all of them, for as long as I have left. I sat on the bench until the air grew cold and my old bones started to protest. Then I walked inside, checked the locks, turned off the lights, and climbed the stairs to bed. Tomorrow, I'd drive to Los Gatos for Saturday breakfast with the family. We'd make pancakes, Ethan's chocolate chip, Emma's funny face, and talk about school and swimming and whatever painting Emma was working on. David would tell bad jokes that made Jennifer groan. The kids would laugh. The morning light would stream through the windows of the house I'd helped them buy. Normal things, family things, the things that mattered, the things that were worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. For the next story, click on the video on the left. Thank you for listening, and remember, family is always worth fighting for.